Hello everyone, I am the Night Owl, and welcome to my third and final installment of the Brothers War set review. I hope you've been enjoying these. I certainly have enjoyed making them a lot. It's been a big learning experience for me, both in content creation and also it's been nice. Typically I always look through the sets and get a sense of like the what the limited environment is going to be like and what kind of cards I'm looking at, what I'm excited about. But honestly, this has been a big lesson for me as well, as far as taking the time to really truly evaluate each card individually and see how I think and feel about things. So I feel like it's been a big level up for me going through this. And so I appreciate you being here and watching and enjoying the process. I hope it's been informative for you. I know that these turn out pretty long, but I've liked making it. I've hoped that you like them as well. So that's enough preamble. As I mentioned in my last video, if you want to get my like preliminary thoughts about my process and all that, the intro in the white and blue set review will suffice for that. But just quick notes, I'm going to be going through these in I'm going to be doing the multicolored, colorless, and lands today. And I'm going to go through them in rarity order: common, uncommon, and then rare. Starting with the multicolor, there are no multicolor commons. We're starting with the uncommons here, but that's the basic layout of what we're doing here. So let's get started. Our first uncommon is Arbalest Engineers. It's our red-green uncommon for a red-green and 1. It is a human artificer 2/2. When Arbalest Engineers enters the battlefield, choose 1. Arbalest Engineers deals 1 damage to any target. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains trample and haste until end of turn. Or create a tapped Power Stone token. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about this card is it secretly actually has 4 modes, right? It's the 1 damage, I'll put a counter on another creature, create a Power Stone token, or put a 1/1 counter on Arbalest Engineers, and it acts as effectively a 3/3 haste. I don't think that you're going to be putting a counter on another creature and giving that creature haste very often, so that's why I kind of consider this almost like a 4th mode. It's like it is like a haste creature, or you get the counter on something else. I didn't notice when I first initially read this card that the ability adds trample for a turn. I mentioned in my previous set reviews that I actually think adding trample on some of the larger creatures in the set is going to be a big deal, because I expect a lot of chump blocking in our future here. So what do I think about this card? Well, I think it is decent. I think it is decent. When I first initially read the card, I believed that the create a tap Power Stone token was going to be your primary mode on this, with maybe the secondary being making this a 3/3 haste, and then occasionally you would add a counter to something, and then very occasionally you would ping things. It really depends on how many 1 toughness creatures there are. There are some sets where if there was like a ton of 1 toughness creatures running around, like just a bunch of them, that would actually be the primary mode. And if it was the kind of format, for example, where everybody's like trying to attack with a bunch of 2/1s, this would almost be like just an incredible uncommon, because it would kill one of their 2/1s, block another one, and just do an incredible job of defense. Um, and then I backed off of that because I was like, well, I don't know how many 1 toughness creatures there are going to be. But now that I've gone through the set review, I actually think that there's more than I anticipated, and there's going to be soldier tokens. So that's a lot of words to say. Initially, I was off of the 1 damage ability because I just didn't think it was going to come up that much. But I'm a little bit back on it. I think it's fine. Um, I think a lot of value in this card. It's going to be kind of as you have to be seeing how good the random 2/2 body is for you to like use one of the other abilities and leave a 2/2 behind. I think just a 2/2 is going to be okay. So overall, where do I rate this? I rate it as about a C plus. This has like a bunch of options on it, and all of the options are good. Like I said, it's like really kind of 4 different abilities, and so it's going to be difficult to not use this in an effective way. Um, and again, it really leans on how good is it when you use one of the abilities and leave a random 2/2 behind. How strong is that 2/2? Sometimes it's really super good, sometimes it's almost meaningless. I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle here. So yeah, I rate this at about a C plus. I don't think it's like a bomb or anything. I think that each of the effects, like if you rate each one of these effects individually, it's all like a decent rate, but not amazing. But the combination of all of them means that this is actually has like a ton of really good options on it, and it's going to be difficult to not get some sort of good value out of this card. So I think it's a C plus. Um, yeah, I think I'm comfortable with it there. Okay, we have a Battery Bearer. Battery Bearer is a human artificer for 2 and a green and blue. It is a 3/4, and it has creatures you control have tap, add colorless. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. So it gives them the Power Stone ability. Whenever you cast an artifact spell with mana value 6 or greater, draw a card. Okay. Okay. So I think that this card looks pretty good. So the first ability, creatures you control have tap, add colorless, the Power Stone effect. Um, I think that that is probably going to be really strong in some decks. The more that you can go wide, and then of course the more that you have to like dump the Power Stone ability, like the Power Stone mana into stuff, obviously. So it's going to be a little bit more deck specific. That isn't a very good ability, just cold without much to do with it. But I think it's a little unfortunate that this is in green blue, just in the sense that I don't think that blue has a couple of soldier tokens. Green doesn't so much. Not that you have to use soldier tokens with this, but it's a big difference if you have like 4 soldier tokens on the battlefield and then you play this because that generates a ton of mana. Whereas in green and blue, blue has a couple soldier tokens it can make. But overall, I think you're gonna be needing to, because of the colors, it's in tapping real cards to activate that ability, which isn't bad. It's not as synergistic as it could be if this was like a white spell. Does that make sense? But it's not bad. And then, of course, so this is really kind of like the big robot caster card, because and that's really what the second ability is like leaning you towards, right? Like you want to cast a mana value 6 or greater, draw cards off it, and then this card will help you single handedly do that. So really, in any deck where you have big robots, this is going to be a good card, I think, because even if you do have to tap real cards to like cast the creatures, just running out like the super big robots like ahead of schedule is going to be very nice, and you get additional value when you do that. And so pretty happy with it. And one thing I like about this card is it actually is a decent size. A 4 mana 3/4. I mean, I was kind of dissing on that when I was talking about the Giga Chad Mole, but when it has like a bunch of really good abilities on it, I'm much more happy. Like a 4 mana 3/4 is actually a decent size when there's good abilities attached, and this does have that. So I rate this as like, I think if you are in the deck where you are doing the thing that Battery Bearer wants you to do, it is like a C minus. Or wow, B minus. Sorry, it's like a B minus. It's not like insane or anything like that, but it can really like be a good glue card for your deck that is trying to cast these gigantic artifact creatures. If you don't have like a lot of cheap creatures to like use the mana ability with, if you don't have a lot of expensive artifacts to get the card draw with, this clearly drops off, which is why I don't rate it higher. But in a deck where you're trying to do those things, I think this is a really excellent utility piece that comes with also like a good size. Like, because another thing that's nice about it is like if you have like one of the big robots or whatever, you can like use this, tap your creatures, cast the spell, draw a card. Oh, you don't have like that much more to use with the Power Stone abilities. Well, now this is just a 3/4. Like that's really great, So I think this card's pretty strong. All right, here we have Evangel of Synthesis. I can't tell if this guy's having a good day or a bad day. He seems to be liking it. I'm not so sure. It is a Phyrexian human cleric for blue-black. It's a 2/3, so good stats. When Evangel of Synthesis enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. Okay, and as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, Evangel of Synthesis gets +1/+0 and has Menace. Hmm. Okay, so as far as like gold uncommons go, this card isn't like absurd or anything, but I do think that's actually pretty decent. So just on the front end of, so the first ability, so like I said, good stats, 2 mana, 2/3, solid stats. That generally is like a strong stat line to begin with, no abilities. Okay. Um, the draw and discard a card is actually quite strong because I think it fixes your hand. It triggers all of your other, like in both blue and black, which makes sense as the blue black uncommon. There are multiple cards that have the draw a second card this turn ability, and this immediately triggers it when you cast it. So even when you play this like later in the game, this can trigger your other cards that have those abilities, which I kind of like. Um, and then looting, I think, is actually like a little bit better in this set because there are so many graveyard synergies that like it dumps a creature in your graveyard for both like reanimator targets or for like the cards that count creatures in your graveyard. So looting is like extra synergistic in this set, which I really kind of like. I think that's super cool. And so this card does that as well as just fix your draw naturally. And then it turns into a really good beater because if you then continue to do this, if you draw like another card later, a 3/3 menace that you cast for 2 mana that also fixed your hand is really pretty solid. So this card isn't like a bomb or anything, but it's like a C plus. It's like just a really solid 2-drop utility piece that also like has a little bit of late game value and that it fixes your hand a little bit, and can trigger your other cards. Again, it's not like, when I say late game value, it's not like an incredible late game card. It's not like one of the like the mage that draws you additional cards or anything like that, which I think has like way more late game utility. But it has like a non-zero money late game utility, and a 3/3 menace beater. Like if you're regularly doing that, is really pretty good. I think if you're not drawing the extra cards, this card is just is super adequate. That's why I put it at like a C plus. If you are like really going off, like you're like um drawing extra cards like virtually every turn, this is like a really solid beater. The thing is, like, there's kind of like, not that it's bad, but there's kind of counter synergy there in that like in the kind of decks that are like really focused on drawing extra cards all the time, they typically aren't the same decks that are interested in like making aggro plays. Like, yeah, I got there with like a 3/3 menace that's like attacking. Like, I'm a pretty extreme example, but like imagine you cast this, and then you're like, I'm going to follow this up with a bunch of card draw spells. Well, you can attack with this 3/3 menace for like a couple of turns, but if you're not developing your board any more than that, then that pressure doesn't really actually amount to all that much. And so there's just kind of a little inherent tension in this card as far as that goes, but none of that's bad. You're not paying a big cost for this. Blue black on the second turn can be a little tricky sometimes, but overall, I mean, I think for a 2-drop, this like provides like a lot of utility that I think I like it. C plus. All right, we have Falaji Vanguard. For a red, white, and 2, it's a human soldier 2/3 with first strike. Whenever Falaji Vanguard or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Okay, this is like really a pretty powerful beater. Um, Especially with so many cards that like will make multiple creatures on the same turn, this adds a ton of stats to your attacks. It really helps punch all of your smaller creatures through like bigger blockers. It has first strike itself, so this thing's a nightmare to block in combat. I think that this card is like really pretty high. I think it's going to be something like a B- in the red white decks. Yeah, because like if you like go like 2-drop 3-drop Falaji Vanguard, and then like anything you follow up with, even if you just play like one other creature, it adds like a nice bump. And then if you like play one of the cards that like make multiple tokens, like you could add like 6 power to the board in one turn with this thing, which is just absurd. And this is attacking as like a 4 power first striker if you want to like add the stats to it. Or if you have a flyer, you could just super leverage the flyer. Like the fact that this can trigger multiple times a turn is gigantic. And this is like, some cards like ask a lot out of your deck. This guy just asks that you just play more creatures. Okay? Like, yeah, I was going to play creatures anyways. So like, it's not like this has like a hoop that you have to jump through, but it's like a gigantic hoop that's like super easy to hop through, right? It's like it's not really like asking too much out of your deck at all that you like are gonna like follow up with creatures in your aggro deck. Like great. Um, so I think that this guy's like a B- in your aggro decks, or maybe even just like a B. Like I bet you that this card will make combat really, really annoying, and it really is. Like I mentioned this a few times, but it kind of can't be overstated. Getting aggro decks, you want to play all these cheap creatures, and then eventually your opponent will play something big enough that you can no longer just profitably attack. But this kind of just changes that. Like it sets it up so that like it becomes really impossible to like for bigger blockers to not be blocking down and like trading off with like a cheaper creature and making kind of like a mana efficient play that allows you to continue pressuring. I don't know how many flash creatures there are in red and white. I don't think that there are that many. Like I'll have to go back and look. I'm curious how much you can do this at instant speed as well. I guess is one thing, because part of the problem is that it's like a sorcery speed effect. You cast a creature and then you pump one of your creatures, and then maybe only that creature can attack through whatever blocker they present, or they have like interaction that like works with that. Like you like, yes, I'll like pump this one creature up, and then they like use a removal spell on that at that time, and so it eats the trigger on this, which is fine. The 2/3 first strike body is honestly okay on its own too. Anyways, it's a little anemic, but not so much so that I'm actually like a 4-mana 2/3 first strike with like no other text is not amazing. But it's not horrible either. But you do want to watch out for that. All right, here we have Hero of the Dunes. Hero of the Dunes is a human soldier for a black, white, and 3. It's a 3/2. When Hero of the Dunes enters the battlefield, return target artifact or creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then creatures you control with mana value 3 or less get +1/+0. Hello. So this card seems really good. Both black and white have this converted mana cost 3 or less theme going on. So again, this is like one of those hoops where it's like you're going to want to jump through this hoop, but all of like the other cards in the set, it's not like that's like specific to this one uncommon. A lot of the cards are going to ask you to do that anyways. I really think it's going to affect how you draft, where like even if you don't have these mana value 3 or less cards in your deck yet, like I bet you once you get experienced at Brothers of War draft or the Brothers War draft, you're going to be valuing like cards that are 3 or less mana in these colors a little bit higher than the 4 or plus more, even if the 4+1s are a little bit better on their own because of how good of synergy pieces the 3 mana or less creatures are. Like they just work better with the other cards that you could expect to pick up in the future, because there's a bunch of these effects in the set, right? And so I think you're going to be naturally doing this with these cards anyways, so it's not a gigantic hoop. And then, yeah, 5 mana 3/2 is definitely small. It's like it's definitely anemic on its own, but not when it creates like 3 mana worth of value, like just, by returning something to the battlefield immediately. Like that changes that completely. Then it's like actually, this is like a pretty mana positive play. Like a 3 mana, like a 5 mana 3/2 plus another 3 mana creature is like, you actually got really good value out of that if you can hit that. And that's before we even get to the fact that it gives a power pump to all of these things. By the way, this works for all of your tokens too. Like all of your tokens are now 2/1s. Like I think that this card's incredible. I think this card's a solid B, maybe even a B plus in some decks. Like this just seems like it is such a powerful play that swings the board so much in your favor. It creates 2 bodies, and gives you like a huge pump. Not like a huge pump, but like a really meaningful pump. I think the only problem is like you get, because it has this ability on it, you're probably scared to get it into combat, and it's not very good at combat because it's only a 3/2. So it might be the fact that your Hero of the Dunes kind of like stays home in this position and waves this flag around and doesn't do much attacking on its own because you want to keep the power pump on the battlefield. But maybe not even like in the right deck. Like if you're aggro enough, you just alpha and it just doesn't matter. So I like this card a lot. Very powerful. All right, now we have Junkyard Genius, a human artificer for a black, red, and 1. They're a 2/2. When Junkyard Genius enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. Okay, good start. Just get it immediately. For a black, red, and 1, sacrifice another creature or artifact. Until end of turn, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain menace and haste. Wow, okay. So this is like the king of alpha strikes. He's the alpha strike genius. Like, it's an expensive ability and you have to sacrifice something, but this goes right into what I was talking about, where like some aggro decks that don't have like really big expensive things to cast are going to want something to do with these power stones. This is what you want to be doing with those power stones. This is exactly where it's at. Giving your entire board menace is a nightmare to block. So I've been playing, if you watch my mono black aggro standard video, that deck is basically a bunch of mana creatures, and it is a lesson in just how powerful menace stacks up. If your opponent has like 5 creatures, I mean, just imagine your opponent has 5 creatures, right? Well, if you give your entire team menace, they can block 2 of your creatures with their 5 blockers. That is absurd. That is absurd. And especially if you're like going super wide, which you might be, and you don't even have to be, but like imagine you are, that just like destroys their ability to block. And it gives creatures haste, and they all get a power pump. So this ability is cheap enough, especially, so it makes its own power stone, right? So you make the power stone, and then you can use the power stone to just play black-red for this ability. So you could play this guy as a 3-drop, and then on the next turn, like play another 2-drop and give that creature haste and +1/+0 and menace. Or you can wait and like, depending on when on the curve you cast this and when you're doing this, like, you can give another creature haste. So generally, I have a problem with haste granting abilities in that they're usually too expensive to reasonably cast another creature alongside it and then give the creature haste. It ends up being a little meaningless. I don't think that's the case here. I think that because you'll be able to consistently play just black-red for it, you'll be able to cast like a reasonable creature, like a 3-drop, maybe even a 4-drop if you get all the way up, and then to give that creature haste and menace and a power pump, and all your creatures get menace and a power pump and all that. I think that this card is an absurd aggro card. I think it is so good. You're going to need to have stuff to sacrifice. You're going to need to be aggro. But if you are doing that, this card's like a B+. Like, this thing's going to be a nightmare to see on the other side of the battlefield. Also, like, if you have the mana for it, you could just like cast this and activate its ability in the same turn, right? Because this isn't like a tap ability or anything like that. So your opponent could be like, okay, I have reasonable blocks, like things look okay. And then you just cast this and activate it all in the same turn. And it's like, oh, actually I'm dead instead. You just attack through all of my blockers. You get a big power pump. Now this only gives it to other creatures. So this guy himself does not get the abilities at all, which is probably wise because otherwise this dude would be like super busted. So do watch out for that it only works for other creatures. This guy's only ever a 2/2. But fine, yeah, whatever. I think this card's gonna be really, really super strong in the black red aggro decks. So watch out for this. Remember that this card exists. And good luck. All right, now we have the black green one. For a 2 black and green, we got a spider. It is Skyfisher Spider, and it is a 3/3 with reach. Good stats. When Skyfisher Spider enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, destroy target non-land permanent. Okay. When Skyfisher Spider dies, you may gain 1 life for each creature card in your graveyard. If you do, exile Skyfisher Spider from your graveyard. Wow. So this is an incredible control card. A 3/3 for 4 mana. little anemic. Hill Giants don't really cut it, but the reach makes a big difference because this will like stonewall a lot of the flyers in the set. So I think that that's really excellent. It's definitely more of a defensive body than an aggressive body, which fine. And then you may sacrifice another creature when you just do destroy target online permanent. So even setting aside the fact that there are soldier tokens in this set, and there's going to be a lot of ways to just like sacrifice like a measly token to destroy something real. Even if you don't, it's like a perfectly acceptable trade. Like you sacrifice like a real card for whatever your opponent's best non-land permanent is. Also, the way that the set is shaping up, like non-land permanent is like a bunch of things. There's a bunch of artifacts that are probably non-creature artifacts. I mean, there's a bunch of creatures. There's a bunch of enchantments. Like this would be good if it just said destroy target creature, and it says destroy target non-land permanent. That is incredible. Really super good ability, even if you don't even have like just the cheap fodder to throw at it, which sometimes you will. So already right there, I really like it. And then when it dies, you gain life for each creature card in your graveyard. Okay, so like that's also super good because there's a bunch of mill in green and black. They're both probably the two strongest mill colors, right? Um, and so even if your opponent is like really applying the pressure, this is like a good defensive body that shoots their best ability to pressure you, by just even though you have to sacrifice some of your board presence, you're gonna like ruin your opponent's ability to attack. And then if they do like get a big attack and you just trade this off for something, it just pads your life total super big. This is like a B. I think this is like a B. It doesn't like run away with the game or anything like that. But I think it does enough things all together that it's just like such a solid defensive card that I think you'd be really really happy with this in your green black decks. And it looks like it needs like a little help, but I think that the way that set's going to play out, like because both of these abilities are like kind of contingent on you having other things, but I think the cost on that on both sides of that is actually very very small, or like you're going to be setting it up so naturally that I'm not too worried about it, and I think you're just going to get the value off of this really pretty easily. So B, maybe even like B plus if you're like really under attack. I think this will really help you. All right, now we have Third Path Iconoclast. It is a human monk for a blue-red 2/1. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Okay, so this is a prowess ability, but it's not prowess. It creates 1/1s for you. I think that's really pretty good. So first of all, the fact that this starts as like a 2-mana 2/1 is really pretty good. Because with spells like this, you want to start early. If this was like a 5-mana spell and it had this ability, there's a good chance that you would have like expended a good number of your non-creature spells by the time you cast this. Nah, run this out on turn 2, and then as you just naturally cast your spells, you will continue to like gain advantage that way and kind of start to go wide. It does make soldiers too, so it doesn't have a relevant creature type itself, but blue has a small soldier theme, so that's kind of nice. I don't think red does too much. My only concern, and this isn't like a huge concern, but I wonder how well blue-red can leverage the additional 1/1 soldier artifact creature tokens, because it doesn't have like a lot of like mass pumps. It has some. I think there was the red instant that's trumpet blast or make 2 1/1s. I forget what that's called. So that's a good way to leverage soldier tokens. But so 1/1, obviously free 1/1s are great, but they aren't like crushing by any means. So I'm curious how well you're going to be able to leverage that. But then again, it triggers all your artifact synergies too, like just by playing artifacts and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's pretty good. I think it's like a B minus because it is just a 2-mana 2/1, which isn't gigantic, and you need to like cast the non-creature spells. So it requires a little bit of work out of you. You can't just like follow this up with a bunch of creatures. If you just follow this up with creatures, it's just a 2/1. That's not very good. So it's going to require your deck to kind of have a specific look to it. And then ideally you have a way to leverage the 1/1s. Because just having 1/1s, and this is a good time. I talked about this a little bit. This is a good time to really talk about this. Don't get me wrong. Additional 1/1s are better than not having additional 1/1s. But at the same time, they are just 1/1s. And if you don't have like a great way to like leverage those, their impact can be muted. Like if you have like no spells, like your opponent like gets like a couple creatures on the battlefield, and you don't really have any spells to like help you push through good attacks or anything like that, the ability of the 1/1s to actually like get a lot done can be like really crushed, so just look out for that. This card just is going to require a lot more work to leverage, but if you're doing that, it is a powerful ability on a reasonable static creature, so I'll call it like a B minus. All right, now we have the green-white multicolor. It is a green-white human artificer. It is a 1/1. Okay, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Hmm. I like this one a little bit less than some of the other cards that I've seen, though you could probably super go off with it. Maybe I'm underrating it a little bit. So first of all, the green white 1/1, that's not great. You know, obviously the stats are kind of low. And then you have to follow this up with artifacts, and you'll slowly start getting 1/1s that make it more acceptable. Um, if you're really going off with artifacts, this really, and you like start with this on 2, this really can start to go off, but you do kind of have to get there because, like, say you play this and then you play like 2 artifacts, and that's like all you play. That's okay. You play this 1/1, it made 2 1/1 counters. That's a fine payoff, but that's not amazing. If you only get 1/1 counter with this, then it's not good at all, you know. Um, it's not like embarrassing, but that's not great. So like you're gonna really want to do it, and maybe prioritize cards that make multiple artifacts at the same time, like the white 6 mana spell that makes 4 1/1s. I mean, you get to distribute 4 1/1 counters. So with the right cards, like this is what I'll say about this one is this is the one that kind of requires I think the most synergy because it's like it's the worst rate on its own. And if you aren't getting there with the synergy, it offers you the least. And when I say getting there with the synergy, I mean more than like doing this like a couple of times. Also, it's like pretty bad off the top, you know, because if you draw this as like one of your last cards and you've already cast a bunch of artifact spells, you don't have much gas left in your hand. It's basically just a 1/1. So you got to be kind of careful. So it has sequencing problems and it requires like a lot out of you. Though I should say this, the same thing is true for Third Path Iconoclast. If you draw it as like one of your last spells, it kind of falls into the same group, you know. So just a note on that one as well. Um, So yeah, I think that this card's decent. There are gonna be boards where you run this out on 2, and then every one of your cards afterwards is either an artifact or produces an artifact, and this just puts a ton of stats on the table. But also there are gonna be draws where it's like you run this out and then you just don't draw it alongside your other artifact generating spells, and it's gonna be really weak. Or you're gonna draw this like after everything else, and it's gonna be really weak. Overall, it's like a B minus and a deck well supported for it. Um, of course the value goes, and this is why I say like watch the letter grades here because like that's like all of the parts put together. But if you do run this out on turn 2 and then chain artifacts afterwards, like this is gonna perform way better than a B minus. Like it's gonna be in like B plus range, right? But that's in that specific situation when you go off with it, when you do the thing. And that's only going to happen a portion of the time. So don't get me wrong, this card is powerful, but you got to watch the sequencing, and you're going to really want to get there. All right, now we have Yoshin Tactician. For a blue, white, and 2, it is a human soldier, 3/4. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. Yo, okay. This is like almost like a B plus in the blue white deck specifically. Both of those colors have a bunch of soldiers. It's kind of clearly the soldier themed color pair, you know. Um, and giving all of them, I mean, it's like all of your tokens basically, and then also like a huge portion of your creatures in this color pair all get anthemed on top of being a 3/4 itself. Not much more to say than that, you know, it's just that's a really powerful effect. If you have a bunch of soldiers, I mean, this just adds a ton of stats onto the board the turn that you cast it. And even if you only have like a couple of soldiers, like 1 or 2, like this is still like a really good effect on top of a 3/4 that you're playing. So I think you're going to want this card every time you're playing blue, like every time you're playing blue white. Because what I'll say is you really don't even have to be going deep on soldiers for this card to be okay. If it adds just a couple of points of power, it is still an acceptable card as a 4 mana 3/4. And it'll improve all of your tokens and so many of the cards. It's like, in other words, it's going to be almost impossible to not get there to some degree in this color pair. Like it's hard to imagine a blue white deck that is so lacking on soldiers of any kind that this becomes a cuttable card. Um, so I'm gonna say it's like a B, and all the way up to like B plus if you're like really getting there on soldiers. I think it's just gonna be just super powerful. The turn you cast it, again, even if you only have a couple, I think this card's really super solid. So is that all the uncommons? It is. Okay, on to the rares. Okay, and our first multicolor rare is Deathbloom Ritualist. Deathbloom Ritualist is a elf warlock for a black, green, and 3. It's a 3/5. It has tap. Add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Hmm. Well, I think this card's okay. I certainly won't be high picking it. So first of all, 5 mana 3/5, solid stats. I think that 5 mana 3/5s are all right. You know, not incredible, but they're good defensive bodies, and they actually attack better than they look. You know, so right there, like just vanilla 5 mana 3/5s certainly aren't like great magic cards, but I think they're just a slight bit better than people give them credit for, just because of how well they do lock down a board. Um, As for the tap ability, so first of all, I think this card just has like a lot of internal tension to it, and I'm just kind of not crazy about it. So here's what I mean by that. So first of all, this is a 5 mana spell, and that the primary thing the ability of this spell does is generate additional mana. So that's only going to be useful if you are like really trying to power out high mana stuff, either by casting like really gigantic spells, which you could be trying to do, and this would go a long way towards getting you there, or activating abilities. The thing is, that's not like a really like special thing to do in this format. Like so many cards have power stones attached to them that it's like, granted, this one card can generate a ton of mana, but like a lot of your cards help you cast your giant monsters or activate your abilities. Like a lot of them do. Because they have power stones, like you're going to be doing what this card does as far as its ability goes in like a nickel and dime fashion by just casting a lot of your other spells. So this isn't like unique, like, this card is what allows you to cast your gigantic spells. Like you're going to be able to do that with your other cards too. Does that make sense? Even though that like it's not bad on its own. And then it is limited by the number of creature cards in your graveyard, which I don't think is like the biggest hurdle, especially at the point that you're casting this. Like you might have a couple, though it's possible that you don't have any, or your graveyard gets exiled, and then this is just a vanilla 5 mana 3/5. And then the other way that this has tension too is that like, so I've talked. There's actually been a lot of opportunities to talk about this here. There's some modal spells are really nice because it's like, okay, you can do this one mode or this other mode, and maybe like each mode is like slightly overcosted, but because you have the option, um, the combination of the two like is greater than the sum of its parts, right? Creatures like this are like kind of the opposite, where it's like, okay, this is a 5 mana 3/5, but to use it as a 3/5, I can't use its mana ability. Or if I'm using its mana ability, I can't really use it as a 3/5 unless I like use it defensively, like I like let my opponent like go to the attack step and maybe they don't attack through this, and then at the end of the turn I cast this, use this to like cast an instant or something like that. Then you can like get both sides of the body out of it. But basically like this has like two different halves to it, but the two halves, and granted the modal cards I'm talking about, they do the same thing, but like this card just like it conflicts a little bit more, you know what I mean, where it's like this is either a really really expensive way to generate a little bit more mana at the end of the game, or it's an overcosted 3/5 if I don't want to use the mana ability. And neither of those like really add up together that much. Does that make sense? I know I'm like, it's like it sounds a little bit like splitting hairs, and I'm comparing it to the modal cards, which are both also overcosted for each of their abilities. But this one is like each ability is like so much. If I'm using either half of this card, um, it's like way overpriced for what you're getting out of it. You know what I mean? And sure, you can like cast this, use it to like dump your hand out, and then you have a 3/5 behind. That's fine. But this card is that's just not amazing, and it's not going to be a super common play pattern. This card's like a C, maybe even like a C minus. You really have to be doing something very specific for for this to be good in your deck. Like again, really big creatures. You want to have something to do with a bunch more mana than 5 in the late game, and then it's like then you have like some extra mana and you get like this 3/5 out of it. If you're playing green black, I don't think that this is a bad card at all. I would not be like excited about this card in any way. Or if I'm like picking like a bunch of black spells and then I see this, I'm not going to be like, oh, maybe I'm black green by picking this. I just think it's not embarrassing, but I don't think that this card does anything special like on either end. Okay, now we have Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard. The guy got his weapons enchanted. That's nice. He's cost green red. He's a human soldier, 3/3. All right, wow, good stats. Sacrifice Hajar Loyal Bodyguard. Legendary creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. Well, very flavorful ability. Um, it really is going to depend on how many legendary creatures you have. Though I say that if you were playing green red, this is just a 2 mana 3/3, right? Assuming you can get green red on your second turn, which isn't always the case. So yeah, if you're playing green red, great. Yeah, 2 mana 3/3, go for it. And then maybe you end up like a bunch of legendary creatures. Like I don't know how many legendary creatures there are in green and red though. I'm trying to think. Like I guess there are a couple green legends. There's Titania. There's Gale. In red, there's Mishra. I'm trying to think who else there might be. But like that ability is like very, very minor upside that just doesn't come up very often. Like, I would just evaluate this as like a 2 mana 3/3 in green red, and then occasionally you will get to use its ability. But even then, like, your opponent will see this on the battlefield, right? Like, they'll know that they can't just point their kill spell at your legendary creature because Hajar will save them. So like I rate the ability here really low, even when it does come up. As a 2 mana green red 3/3, it's like a C. This it's just unimpressive, you know. If you run this out on 2 in your green red deck, you got a slightly overstated creature, you know. So, but even then, you have to have the right colors of mana on turn 2, and then after that, it's just like a 3/3. I don't know, maybe like a C plus, but it just doesn't do anything special. All right, we have Harbin, Vanguard Aviator. For blue-white, they're a 3/2 flying. Am I reading that right? They're a 3/2 flying for blue-white? Dang, and they're a soldier? What's up? All right. And then whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying until end of turn. Okay, this dude slams in the blue-white deck. First of all, blue-white 3/2 for flying, that's incredible stats. What the heck is up with that? This guy slaps. So right there, even if you have no other soldiers, like this is like one of the best beaters that you can cast in your blue-white deck. So big fan of that. And then 5 or more soldiers is a lot, but he's a soldier himself, so you only need 4 more. And then not only does it provide like a power pump, but they all go to the skies. So this is just like I call it the junkyard genius or whatever he is. He's the king of alpha strikes. This is like the emperor of alpha strikes. Like he just like it takes your entire team to the air. And it's not even like, now granted, most of your team is probably going to be soldiers, both because you're blue-white and because at the point that you're activating this ability, most of your team is probably soldiers. But even if you have non-soldiers in the squad, like it's like, come on, you're part of the team now. You join us, recruit, and they get the +1/+1 flying as well. 5 or more soldiers is a lot, but it's not like actually a pipe dream in this set because there are a lot of ways to make soldier tokens. And so like this is actually like it is a hoop to jump through. It's not going to be free, but this will happen. People will do this to you, and hopefully my listeners, I hope you're doing it to other people. This guy's like a B minus maybe, because ultimately like he is just a beater, but he is a king beater. This is one of the most like beat up 2-drop creatures that isn't something like where they like gain additional counters every turn or something like that, like some of like green creatures in the past have done or whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. As far as like just raw stats on the card wise, dude slaps. And that ability will kill your opponent sometimes, especially when you're attacking with that many. Like, there's no way that they have like the good enough flying defense that like the alpha doesn't just like slip through. Even if it's like a chump attack with like a bunch of your creatures, it's still gonna get like a bunch of damage through and they're gonna die. So yeah, guys like a B minus. And if you have like a whole bunch of like soldier tokens in your deck, like if you were like really playing like soldier token aggro, guys like a B plus. It's like it's going to be really hard to win the game if this guy doesn't die, or for your opponent to win the game if this guy doesn't die. So big fan of Harbin here. It's handsome too. All right, next we got Legions to Ashes. For a black, white, and 1, it's a sorcery. Exile target non-land permanent opponent controls, and all tokens that player controls at the same name as that permanent. Okay, this is reasonable. This is reasonable. I mean, it's just like a Vindicate. It's a black, not instant speed, but black, white, and 1. And it's an exile, so it like, gets rid of all kind of stuff. And it has the added utility. So basically, it's just an exile removal spell at sorcery speed for black, white, and 1, with the added value of if you want, you can eat all their Power Stone tokens or all of their Soldier tokens. So it's like a kill spell with like also like 2 different modes on it with 2 additional modes. Does that make sense? I think it's good. I think it's like a B. This is like a B, right? Like being able to like point it at anything. It's also, again, it's non-land permanent. So I actually kind of like, I mean, it's a little scary, but I actually kind of like how many different ways there are to destroy non-land permanents or artifacts and enchantments in the set, because there are a lot of strong artifacts and there are a lot of strong enchantments. And so there are a number of cards that like, there are some sets where like the enchantment removal is so weak that it never makes your deck. And then there are powerful enough like rare enchantments or uncommon enchantments that it's like you never want to just play the enchantment removal, but then your opponent has this like enchantment bomb, and it's like I just can't interact with this spell. Like not only is your spell a bomb, but in order to like first of all, if you're playing best of one, you probably just don't have an answer to it. And even if you're playing best of three, like say they only have like the one enchantment in their deck, and it's like, what do I play like my like naturalized card, you know, to like beat this one enchantment where it's like, and it's and probably a lot of you listening like understand like why this is bad, but let me elaborate on this a little bit too. And I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but like whatever, I'm talking about it. You are at a loss there, even if you hit the win of like eating their enchantment bomb with your like anti-enchantment spell, because the situation you're in is like, if I draw my anti-enchantment spell but you don't draw your enchantment, I draw a dead card. If you draw your enchantment and I don't draw my anti-enchantment spell, you have a bomb that I can't interact with. And then only occasionally do I get to just trade like one for one with you, so it's not even like a win. It's like you just traded evenly on resources. Maybe you picked up a mana or two. But as far as like the exchange goes of putting an enchantment style bomb in your deck or putting an enchantment removal card in your deck, the person who's playing the bomb card is on the winning side of that exchange pretty much all the time, even if occasionally you do get to eat that enchantment. Does that make sense? So what I like is that in this set, there's actually a bunch of ways that you're going to kind of naturally want to include in your deck to interact with these kinds of permanents. You're not going to be just stone cold a lot of the time to a really sick enchantment that your opponent has. I think that's actually a lot better design. It's not as miserable when somebody plays a card like that and you're like, I guess I just can't touch your best card in your deck unless I do something really bad to my own deck, like, and I just lose anyways, you know? So I really like that. So all that to say, exile target non-land permanent is really pretty good. And the fact that you can get out from under a go wide situation, or if you know that they're going to be like tapping out for something big, you can eat all of their power stones. Maybe they're playing like a sacrifice deck and you get to eat all of their fodder. Like this will get you out from under a ton of problems. So it's like almost like it's B level. I think it's just a solid B. That's the way you can cast it, maybe even a B plus on certain boards. If like their deck is like really like if they're playing like a Harbin deck and they're trying to go for like a bunch of soldiers and you can eat all the soldiers, like that's probably a really big win for you. So yeah, I like this card quite a bit. Uh-oh. Mishra claimed by Gix. All right, so Mishra is a legendary Phyrexian human artificer for a black, red, and 2. They're a 3/5, so good stats. Whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Oh, ouch. If Mishra claimed by Gix and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking, you own them both, you control them, exile them, meld them. Yeah, okay, cool. And it enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. Well, so if you ever do that, just remember that it gets to attack like that. What the heck? So of course we're going to just have on the merits of just the without the meld ability. This card is pretty absurd. Like 4 mana 3/5, really good stats right there. Like that's just a solid static creature. And the fact that like it's like whenever you attack, so like the turn you cast this if you're attacking with other creatures, like right then it activates. Not only can Mishra pretty fearlessly attack on their own because they have 5 toughness, but yeah, you get the drains immediately, and that is such a huge swing. Like you basically never ever ever can lose a race with Mishra in play as long as you get to attack with creatures, because you're just going to be like absolutely like murdering your opponent's life total while padding your own just for doing what you were going to do anyways. Mishra's like, I don't think it's quite in the A bomb level, like A minus bomb level range. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. That is a really powerful ability, but you do have to be attacking with creatures to go off with it. But assuming you can do that, like it just like really, 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 really hurts. It makes it like impossible to lose. Like it not only does it like work well in a race, but you can like initiate a race by doing that. Like if it was like if the board was like kind of even, it no longer is, because now you can just like fearlessly attack and your opponent basically has no good options. Like the best thing they could do at that point is just like trade off all the creatures and try to like simplify the board as much as possible. Because if they just leave your creatures on the board, they're going to lose the game. So yeah, this guy's like A minus, B plus, depending. Especially if you're going wide, because that's another thing that this creature can do too, is that like, say like you actually don't have good attacks, what you can do is you can just wait till your board is big enough, and then like just like do like a big alpha strike, and then just like drain them out. You know, it's like, oh, you stop me up, well, I'll just cast another creature, and then another creature, and then another creature, and then you have like, you know, they stabilized at like 8 life, and then you just like wait to get like as many creatures as you need on the board, and just like attack, and then they just die. So yeah, really, really, really powerful spell. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and actually start it at like A minus. Like I think that this is a bomb level card, and then I'll go down from there. All right, we have Mishra Lost to Phyrexia. Again, this isn't going to happen very often, but you know, let's read the card. Whenever Mishra Lost to Phyrexia enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 3. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Mishra deals 3 damage to any target. Destroy target artifact or planeswalker. Creatures you control gain menace and trample until end of turn. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. So this so just to give you a little secret of how like I evaluate cards here. There's a lot of abilities, there's a lot of text on this card, but I'll just actually simplify the card. Whenever Mishra Lost to Phyrexia enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 1. You win the game. And that's the card. It's pretty good. So just, yeah, if you get a chance to make Mishra Lost to Phyrexia, do it, because the text that says you win the game is actually really pretty good. I suggest you do that. All right. We have Mishra, Tamer of Makfala. So I did a little lore research because, first of all, I love the lore of this set. I read the Brothers War book back in the day, like the novel, when I was a young sprout, and I was like really into reading the Magic novels and all that. And so I remember like a lot of this stuff and like a lot of the story of like what happened. So I was really excited to see this set, and I've been pretty jazzed about it. And so in my research and in my lore research, I learned that Makfala is the Falaji name, I believe is the Falaji name for the dragon engines. So he's a tamer of the dragon engines. That's what that's about. Um, and I also like the aesthetic of like the flaming swords, like his red hot sword here. I think is pretty sick. Anyways, Mishra, Tamer of Makfala, is a human artificer for a black, red, and 3. He's a 4/4. His permanents you control have ward, sacrifice a permanent. That is super powerful. Now, I will say, I think the life of a permanent is pretty cheap in the Brothers War. Both of these guys are used to just throwing permanents in the meat grinder, and the set definitely reflects that. So because there are going to be so many different tokens of like various kinds, like it won't be the worst thing. I actually think like if it had like a mana cost ward, it might be a little, well, I guess Power Stones kind of like make the mana cost ward even like a little less painful. But all I'm saying is there are situations where like mana cost wards are even worse, because you will always have the ability to sacrifice a permanent. Like you're always going to have a land or something like that. So even though it hurts, it never creates situations where like you literally can't pay the ward, which happens a lot with the mana cost ones. I mean, Tolarian Terror did that to me plenty of times, where it's like, I can't even choose to like pay the ward here. I can't kill it. You will always be able to choose to pay the ward, but it hurts. So I'm not like trying to like really look down my nose on it, but it's not going to be impossible to pay that. It's just nice. It's also really contingent on your opponent having a bunch of removal spells. This ability, it's going to be really contextual. Sometimes it's going to be really painful for your opponents. Sometimes they won't even notice, okay? And at 5 mana 4/4 is fine. And then each artifact card in your graveyard has Unearth. Okay, all right. So I don't know how I feel about that. I'm gonna have to. This will have to be evaluated when I look more at the colorless spells and see just how many of them in black and red are going to have Unearth anyways, and like what kind of cards you can sneak into your deck that this would actually be like nice and effective with. It's never going to hurt, like if you have like really any sort of like artifact creature. Like the ability, having the ability is better than not, but I don't think it's like absurd or anything either. I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Overall, I rate this guy as like a B. The ward ability is decent. The 5 mana 4/4 is like a little small, but not like embarrassingly so. And the Unearth ability is going to be really contextual as well. Like it's really going to matter what artifacts specifically you have in your deck, how easily you get them into the graveyard, and then unearthing them may or may not be all that special at all. So I think that this guy's fine. If you put like a bunch of artifacts in your deck, yeah, having the Unearths is going to be kind of nice. If you play against like a control deck that's like basically a pile of removal spells, yeah, the ward's going to be kind of nice. But there are going to be situations where this guy isn't much more than a 4/4. I think he's a B. All right, we have Queen, Caleb Bin Krug. Kayla is a human noble for a red, white, and 1. She's a 2/3. Has the ability 4, tap. Discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many cards. You may choose an artifact or creature card with mana value 1. You discard it this way. Then do the same for an artifact or creature cards with mana values 2 and 3. Return those cards to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so this card really, 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 really depends on the contents of your hand. If you have the right hand, this is like a bomb level card. If you don't, this is a 3 mana 2/3. Okay? Because if you activate this ability and you have something that hits all 3 of these, then you just like picked up a huge win, right? You discard your hand, but actually you get to play 3 spells, like 6 mana worth of spells, and draw like that many cards. Like that's a bomb. Like that's incredible, right? But if you aren't getting there with that ability, like if you only have like 1 2 mana spell in your hand, and like, and it's only creature artifacts. You only have 1 2 mana creature artifact in your hand. You might not even be able to activate this really. And it's very possible for like you to have hands where it's like, okay, I have hands that this works with, but I also have like this removal spell that I really want. I don't actually want to discard this all that much, you know. So I would say that this is like a huge build around card. If you build your deck to take advantage of this card, this is a sick bomb because it basically just like, you know, the thing about like card draw spells, because really what's happening is like when you activate this ability, right, and you get to play the spells afterwards, it is both card draw value and mana value. Now you paid 4 for the ability, but like say you even only get a 2 and a 3 mana spell back. Well, you've gained a mana, right, by paying 4 for this ability and then putting 5 mana worth of permanence on the battlefield. So you've gained a mana and you've drawn 2 additional cards because those 2 cards actually go into play, and then you know you replace them in your hand, right? So it's like card draw and mana value, which is very rare. Usually card draws negative mana value, right? So that is gigantic. That is so huge. So if you build around this card properly, it's like an A minus if you get to like do the thing. If you don't, or like it's very possible to have very awkward hands with this. So you really have to keep that in mind, and it could like definitely drop way down if you don't have like the right setup for it. But this is worth trying to go off on. Also, it should be said that because it's an ability, it allows you to turn your power stones into spell mana in a way that like other like you wouldn't be able to cast spells with that anyways. So it could be even more mana value than it looks like. Like if you pay like 3 of the mana for this off your power stones, and you wouldn't have been able to use those power stones anyways. Well, then it's like you get like you pay like 1 mana sort of for this ability and put like 5 or 6 mana worth of permanence in the battlefield, and then draw additional cards. So yeah, I think it's really solid. Also, you can get to the point of the game where it's like you only have like 1 or 2 cards in your hand, and it basically like Kayla starts just being the card to like actually cast your creatures for you. Like you just use Kayla instead of casting your creatures, and all your creatures come with like draw a card on them. You can get to that stage of the game. So yeah, Kayla seems like an A minus in the right deck. But of course, you really got to build around it. You really got to be ready for it. And there are going to be situations where she plays way more poorly than that because it doesn't work out. You have spells you don't want to get rid of in your hand, or you just don't have the right kind of cards in your hand. But even beyond that, honestly, like sometimes maybe you even just have like an awkward hand where it's like, say you have a deck with like it does have some expensive spells in it, but you're like, oh, I can't cast these right now. We could just dump them, and then you just draw a brand new hand, and then it's like, okay, well, I just like fixed my entire hand because like I had these spells that I couldn't cast, these situational spells, and now it's no longer a problem. So now you're in business. And it sets up your like graveyard synergies too. So like the huge synergy piece on top of like drawing cards and creating mana value. This card's a bomb, I think, in the right deck. Planeswalker time. We got Saheeli, Filigree Master. I feel like this is like the exact same stance that she was in like her other card version. Is this like the only way that she stands? Maybe I'm mistaken. For blue, red, and 2, it's a legendary Planeswalker. Saheeli starts at 3 loyalty. For +1, scry 1, you may tap an untapped artifact you control. If you do, draw a card. Okay. -2, create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens of flying. They gain haste until end of turn. Nice. -4, that's a small ultimate. You get an emblem with artifact creature spells you control get +1/+1, and artifacts spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Wow. Okay, so this Planeswalker does look super good. I'm not sure what the right play pattern for it's going to be, only because like typically A lot of planeswalkers, even if they have a really high ultimate, it's like the ultimate's a little bit of a pipe dream, and so it's generally better to use their more powerful minus ability first. This isn't always the case, right? But use their more powerful minus ability just in case something bad happens, and it usually helps you control the board a little bit better, and then you can like start plussing up because you're never really planning getting there with the ultimate anyways. But depending on the board here, like if you are already in control of the board and Saheeli isn't under threat, then you could like, yeah, use the +1, scry, draw. Use the +1 again, scry, draw, or just activate and get the emblem immediately. So the fact that this emblem is really within reach is really really quite good. I don't know how. I mean, I think Saheeli's an A, obviously in the blue red artifact deck. Or not necessarily an artifact deck, but the blue red deck. You do want some number of artifacts, but like you just have a Power Stone or a Soldier token, like whichever, to draw a card. You don't even have to do the draw. You could just scry, though that's a lot worse, obviously. And then the only, and this isn't even much of a downside, but I will say if you cast her and then you do the -2, you make the 2/1/1 Thopters. She goes all the way down to 1, and 2/1/1 Thopters are good, but they aren't like great at defending her, like unless you like do some chumping, which kind of like defeats the purpose of like using her minus ability like that. Like if you just like use her ability and then chump with the Thopters. But what I do like is that like depending on how much in control of the board you are, like you do have like a bunch of different options with her. Um, like all planeswalkers, I mean, she is like a lot better if you have control of the board, just because like her ability to defend herself isn't amazing. Um, so it makes both the first ability and the second ability way better. Like if you were the one applying pressure, the two Thopters actually add a lot of pressure because it's like two haste creatures, or you can more safely like not use that ability to just draw a card and tap one of your other artifacts, and you can start running away with the game. Um, Overall, I think it's going to be really contextual which ability that you use here, depending on like exactly what the board state looks like, what your specific game plan is, all that kind of stuff. But none of the options are bad here. All the abilities are good, and the fact that the emblem is like so in reach with this card is really, really, really interesting. And so I'm really not sure what the best way to go with this card is. Um, and you even have like a difficult decision of like, okay, do you -4 when she's at 4 just to get the emblem, or do you try to like preserve her, get her up to 5, and then get the emblem? Tough call, tough call. So you actually really have to make some choices with this card. Good news is none of them are bad, all good choices. Card's an A. All right, next we have Sarenth Great Worm. Sarenth Great Worm is a worm for a red, green, and 4. It's a 7/6 with trample, and when a land enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. Okay, all right. It's a mythic? Well, it feels like just a rare to me, but okay. Um, I think it's decent. I don't. I don't want to underrate this, like give it a worse grade than it deserves because it's a mythic, and I'm unimpressed with its mythic status. But that said, like I don't think this card does anything too insane. A 7/6 trample for 6 is like decent for a multicolor 6-mana spell. It's not like that like over. I mean, like everybody's favorite dinosaur, Colossal Dreadmaw, is like what, a 6/6 trample for 6, but it's only like a monocolor spell. So this is what you get, like an additional point of power over Colossal Dreadmaw. That's not like insane or anything, right? And then at the point that you're casting this 6-mana spell and then playing additional lands, your big reward is like Power Stones, which don't get me wrong. I mean, that's nice, triggers all your synergies, yada yada. I've said that so many times, but this set is so synergy focused with these Power Stones. Like that's what there is to be said with a lot of these cards. So sorry if it's like kind of a broken record thing, but that's just what there is to be said about them, right? Um, but I think that's kind of weak here, right? Like you've already hit 6 mana, and now you have to play more lands, and your reward for playing more lands after your 6 mana spell are these tokens, which the mana is. Well, I guess what I'm driving at here is the mana from the Power Stones is going to be less valuable. It's not going to be nothing, obviously. You maybe have something to do with it, but it's not going to be as good as like if you're doing this on the third turn, right? Um, I don't know. It's like a C plus. It's like a solid 6-drop. It's a good 6-drop even, but it's not much more than just a good 6-drop. This isn't an absurd mythic. It's just a good 6-drop. Yeah. Tawnos the Toymaker. Tawnos the Toymaker. He's a human artificer for green, blue, and 3. He's a 3/5. Okay. Whenever you cast a beast or bird creature spell, you may copy it, except the copy is an artifact in addition to its other types. This is really cute. Um, I like the flavor of it, that he's like learning from nature and like makes like the artifact copies of the natural things. It's kind of like the good Phyrexian energy, you know, because the Phyrexians are doing like the exact same things, except they make like the mockery of nature. And he's like, no, 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 I'm a good boy, you know, which is flavorfully, I think, pretty cool. Um, I don't know how many beasts or birds there are. I'd have to go through and do a beast or bird count to know how good this card is. It certainly is like a cool flavor win. Like it's super fun. This is probably the sort of thing that'd be fun to like make like a commander or a brawl deck around or something like that. You know, like your beast bird deck with Tawnos is like your like commander is like major cute points. I doubt this card is like super good. This would probably be like a goofy fun one to go in on, depending on like again, I'll have to do a beast and bird count later on. Um, but I will say actually like the thing is if you do have a good number of beast or birds, the ability is powerful. Like if you cast like the Coilos Rock or whatever that card is, and you get like 2/3/3s instead, I mean you kind of done it. And this guy doesn't have like awful stats for like 5 mana, but I think you want like a bunch of like possible copy cards in your deck because like I wouldn't want to play just a 5 mana 3/5 in my deck if I have like one Rock of Koilos or like you guys know what I'm talking about. And it's like okay, I could copy this one creature maybe sometimes if I have my Tawnos out first. The card's like he's like a D plus, you know. Um, but if you have like a bunch of beasts and birds, like that obviously goes up like a good degree. So you'll know when you're supposed to play this card. Um, a fun card though. I kind of just I enjoy it even if I don't think it's very good. All right. Well, we got a Bant card here. Takasia Dig Site Mentor for a 1 green, white, blue human artificer 4/3. All right. But she kind of hits hard for just being like an old excavator lady. Creatures you control have vigilance and tap surveil 1. Yo. All right. And then for 2 green, green, white, white, blue, blue, exile Takasia Dig Site Mentor from your graveyard. Return any number of target artifact cards with total mana value 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So clearly you're not going to go in on this unless you are like set up to be Bant anyways. And this set does not have a multicolor theme, and in fact, if anything, it's going the other direction where it has a kind of a monocolor themed. Now, I say that it's possible that, especially because this returns artifact cards from your graveyard, it's possible that you're able to like stretch your colors a little bit more than the set might suggest because if you fill your deck with colorless spells, you can get away with like pushing your mana as far as your colored spells go a little bit more because it's less likely to cause you problems if you're just casting a bunch of colorless spells. I think that's going to be the minority of decks as opposed to the majority, but it is something to consider. It is something that's technically possible, okay? So first, 4 mana, 4/3, decent stats. Not insane, decent, okay? Um, Creatures you control have vigilance and tap surveil 1. Now that is a good ability. Creatures giving all of your creatures vigilance, first of all, is good enough on its own. Like that just like makes it so difficult to ever beat you in combat as long as your creatures are sized enough for combat. Your opponent's like in a no-win position. Like they're gonna just start trading stuff off, honestly, because they can't like beat your they can't like afford to like take the damage and then like attack back into you and trade their stuff anyways. So if they have the ability to trade with your creatures, they will because they have vigilance, right? And then the fact that it combines with the tap surveil 1 is like such nice value. Like that's really, really, really good. And it just kind of a really elegant design to like add to the power of the card because now you can just like not only do you get to use your creatures on offense and defense, and they also like dig through your deck and like find your best cards and set up your graveyard. So like it goes from your creatures doing like single duty, attack or block or like use a tap ability, and it gives them like triple duty. So it's a really powerful ability actually. And again, it like digs to your best cards and sets up your graveyard. So even if it didn't have the second clause here, just giving all creatures to control vigilance and tap surveil 1 is a really powerful ability if you can cast this card. And then the second ability, I mean, you got to hit green, green, white, white, blue, blue, which is like really a tall ask because like the thing is like to even cast this card, it's going to be more likely in a deck that's like green white with a blue splash. But then if that's what you're doing, you have to hit the double blue to activate the ability. So this ability is going to be really, really hard to activate, even if you can like chip off the 2 colorless by using power stones. The heavy color intensive cost is really, really, really going to be difficult. But if you can do it, Um, you basically win the game. Like you get to just like make like you get to draw and play 10 mana worth of artifacts from your graveyard right onto the battlefield. Um, that's such a powerful swing that it's like it's really hard to imagine like losing from that position if you ever get to activate this, but it's a little bit of a pipe dream. It's probably not going to happen, and the fact that even this card even making your deck in the first place is going to be it's going to be kind of challenging. But if you are playing like green white and you have like a couple different ways to like make like different colored mana, I will say like you can safely ignore the second ability on this and just play this as like a 4/3 that give your creatures the first ability, and that is good enough on its own. So if you can cast this card, it's like a B. Um, but the trick is casting the card. If you can cast this card and activate the ability, it's like a B plus, maybe. But like, that's I don't try too hard to do that. Don't hurt your deck to do that. But yeah, if you can safely splash this card, the vigilance and tap surveil one ability is actually pretty sick. All right, we got our boy Urza Lord Protector. All right, he's got his cereal bowl. He's ready for breakfast after he's done with this wizard battle. He's a human artificer for a blue, white, and 1. He's a 2/4. Artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 mana less to cast. Well, that's a huge swath of spells. That's pretty good. And then 7, if you control Urza and Mightstone, Weakstone, you do the meld. Okay. So again, ignore the second ability for now. A 3-mana 2/4 that makes all of your artifacts, instant, and sorcery spells cost 1 mana less to cast. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's like a B plus, maybe even. Um, that's like so many spells. Like it's going to be like just a huge portion of your deck that like just is like cheaper, and it really allows you to have really good double spell turns because like when you do this like twice in one turn. This he actually generated like 2 mana, which is really nice. Um, yeah, and all of that on just like a 2/4 body is pretty decent. So he's not insane or anything like that, but it does make like all of your stuff, like all your stuff being cheaper is good on both cheap and expensive stuff because if you have a bunch of cheap stuff, really easy to have a double spell turn. And you probably heard me mention double spell turns a lot during this set review, and that's because it's just one of the best ways to get ahead in a game of Magic is to start casting multiple spells in one turn while your opponent's on one spell turn. So providing the opportunity to have faster double spell turns is very nice. Is very nice, and then it just makes making all your big stuff like come down a little bit earlier is pretty good too. So yeah, it's not like super good, but like it is good, decent enough stats on his own, with a solid ability. I like it. B plus. And then of course we have the meld. If you get Mightstone and Weakstone along with it, let's look at Legendary Planeswalker Urza. I'm gonna make the you win the game joke again because look at this guy. He starts at 7. You may activate the loyalty abilities of Urza Planeswalker twice each turn rather than only once. Okay, so as if you didn't have 5 options already, you have 5 options twice. You make everything 2 less to cast. You gain 2 for the +2, +1, draw 2 cards and discard a card. 0, create 2/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. -3, exile target non-land permanent. Jeez, you can do that twice. -10, artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Destroy all non-land permanents. I mean, again, it's like the same gag, but like you win the game. Like, so what? You play 7 mana, flip this guy, and you just get to do whatever you want. You exile multiple things. You make a whole board of soldier tokens. You draw a bunch of cards, or if you have like sweet stuff in your hand, you gain a bunch of life, and then you can cast it for super cheap. And then honestly, if you just like get up to the -10, which you can even do if you go like like +1 0, and then the next turn you can go like +2 10 or whatever. Like you can do that like as on the second turn that you have him, right? Like it's and activate another ability on that same turn. Like it's absurd. And so you just win the game. You just win the game. All right, then we have him here as a younger man, Urza, Prince of Krug. For a blue, white, and 2, he's a human artificer 2/3. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. And then for 6, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types. Okay, so Urza, Prince of Krug is really good if you're going in for the artifact creatures, which if you have soldier tokens, you absolutely are. Even if you don't have soldier tokens, there's a bunch of artifact creatures, obviously. This guy's a bomb. This guy's like a B plus, A minus. if you're really getting there with your artifact creatures, he's like an A minus, because +2/+2 is gigantic, especially if you're going wide with soldiers. Like the turn that you cast this, turning like all of your 1/1 soldiers into 3/3s is like, that's a nightmare for your opponent. That's so bad. And then the fact that he starts spitting out 1/1s on his own, but actually 3/3s because they're artifacts. And then you can like copy like whatever artifacts you want. Like, so like if they have sick abilities, it's really good too. Except it's expensive ability, but like you can cheapen that of course with power stones. um yeah, I think this guy's just a bomb, like an A minus. Like if you have no artifact creatures or artifacts in your deck, I guess he's not, but just like pick him and then pick artifact creatures, and then it's like one of the best spells you could have. So yeah, really super excellent. I think he's like an A minus. Yeah, super good, super good. Okay, that is the multicolor rares. Now we are on to the colorless spells, of which there are a bunch. Let's check them out. All right, squad, time for the colorless spells. Let's look. Here we are at the commons, and our first common is Aeronaut's Wings. It is a equipment for 2 mana with an equip cost of 2. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has flying. All right, time for me to get on my equipment soapbox. I haven't been able to talk about this for a while, and I love talking about this. Equipment sucks. Equipment's bad. I don't like equipment. Now, that doesn't mean that you should never play equipment, or that equipment is always garbage. There are really good equipment that you should play. The only thing I have to say about it is the bar for how good a piece of equipment has to be for it to be acceptable in my mind is so much higher than you would think it has to be, because it has all the same like problems of like a pump spell or whatever, in that like it's important that you have targets for the equipment, which seems obvious, like, well, duh, I'm going to play creatures. But like the reality is, like, especially in your openers, equipment is horrible in your opener, because that's when it's like a lot easier to be like, okay, my opener was like, 4 lands, a removal spell, a pump spell, and equipment. And it's like, well, it's terrible. Like, that's a terrible situation to be in. So that already has a fail state there. And then on top of that, it's super expensive. 2 mana and then 2 additional mana to give 1 creature +1/+0 and flying, that costs like way too much. And lots of equipment, I know I just like mentioned Aeronaut's Wings here, but like lots of equipment fits that category, where it's like it's too expensive to like actually be worth using. It is like so mana negative, right? um and Yeah, and so the ability has to be really, really, really good. +1/+1 or +1/+0 and flying ain't it. And so let's talk about the things that like make equipment like acceptable. I know this is like a big like, this is just a set review and is not supposed to be a lesson on equipment, but like I can't help but talking about this right now. I can't resist myself. I'm sorry. I lack the self-control. Um what makes equipment good? Well, the idea is, right, you have like this spell that is like really poor on mana. It like has like a high cost, a high cost for what you're getting, 2 mana and then 2 to equip. But the idea is, if that creature dies that you equip it on, well, you can equip it on something else. And so it allows you to like gain value by continuously applying this to your various creatures, right? Um, so for that to be good, a couple of things need to be true. One, it needs to be cheap enough that, but I think the much more important cost on an equipment is the equip cost, as opposed to like the front end casting cost. Not that the front end casting cost isn't important, but the thing that makes equipment good is that ability to continuously move it onto different creatures as needed, generally if the initial creature dies. Because what that does is allows you to do the other thing that makes equipment good, which is continuously allow each of your creatures to trade for a higher value than what it was trading for previously. That's why I liked, what was it, in Crimson Vow, the chainsaw. So the chainsaw was 3 and then 3, which is expensive, but it added +3/+3 of stats. That meant your 2/2 could trade for their 5/5, and then your 3/3 could trade for their 6/6, and then your other 3/3 just beats their board because they don't have another 6/6. And so, like, even though that's expensive, the additional value you get of getting each of your creatures to club up is actually really solid. Okay? So again, the equip cost needs to be really cheap so that it's like really easy to do that, because to get the value out of the equipment, that's the cost you're going to have to keep paying multiple times. And it has to add enough to the creature, like in stats or whatever, or some sort of really sick ability, because some equipment does that too, um, that it ultimately makes it worth it. Aeronaut's Wings does not fit into that category. It's an artifact, okay, triggers your artifact synergies, whatever, everything does. +1/+0 and flying just isn't great. Because first of all, if you give the creature flying, it's going to be a lot less likely to trade, And so adding the point of power is like kind of nice, but it kind of like you're gonna put this on one creature and then ideally just keep attacking with that one creature, you know. And sure there are cards that will tangle with your flying creatures, but it's not the same as like that flying creature. Say they do have some sort of like flying defense, it's not going to keep like trading up for value with your opponent's creatures. Okay. One thing that this does do is that like on a stalemated board, you can give a creature flying. If that creature dies, then like you can give another creature flying, and it can be a like in very very specific game states, it can be a route to victory. But it's so specific. While this card is like so bad, is it that it, like I just can't get behind it. It just makes your deck so much more threat light. Like it's just like it puts like a bunch of air in your deck basically for just like such a minor bonus at an extremely high mana cost. To me, Aeronaut's Wings is an F. I will be very, very rarely playing this card. Some people might get a little bit more air mileage out of it, but it's like it's never more than a D. I don't think. Like it just, I think cards like this are so much worse than they look. They're so much worse than they look, which is why I'm so soapboxy about it because it's one of those things where like only when you like view it through like the, some cards you can intuitively look at and like understand like whether it's good or bad. Like we're a lot more used to evaluating creatures and like like this creature is like it's like it's a 3 mana 4/4. Well, that looks pretty good. Or it's like a 5 mana 2/2. Well, but the ability better. We have a much more intuitive understanding of whether the card is good. To understand whether a piece of equipment is good, you tend to have to look at it through a much more theoretical lens, which is why I'm just like an anti-equipment evangelist. Okay, I think equipment is really bad. And there's a lot of equipment. I promise you guys, if you don't just like jam equipment into your deck, like oh it's okay, your win rate will go up. Only in very specific circumstances should you be playing equipment cards, and they better be good because they're so much worse than they look. I promise you, team, they are so much worse than they look. Aeronaut's Wings goes into that camp. I just don't think it's good. Okay, we have a Blitz Automaton. This is our first prototype card, so we'll cover prototype here. Prototype cards have a cheaper, generally colored casting cost, and so if you cast it for the prototype cost, it's generally a smaller creature with the same abilities. Okay, so Blitz Automaton is a 7 mana construct with haste, and it's a 6/4, or you can cast it for its prototype for a red and 2, and it's a 3/2 with haste. I think this card is good. I think this is a decent red common. The other thing about prototype cards, and I'll try to tackle this with each of them, some of them are going to fall into the camp of you will put this in your deck no matter what, even if you don't have the appropriate colored mana to cast it. Because it is just that good, even if you cast on the colorless side. And others will fall into the camp of you'll only want to put this in the deck with the appropriate colored cost because it's just not worth it on the colorless side to do it if you don't have the option to do the colorless side. So a red 3/2 haste for 3 I think is a solid card. It's not like insane or anything like that. It could just trade down for a 3 drop, but it's a solid beater. It's an artifact. It attacks for 3 haste power. Could trade down with the 2 drop, but it's not the end of the world, you know. It's not like the gigantic loss. So I think that on its own, it's like a C. Um, I don't think you would be excited to put this card in your deck if you can't cast for the prototype cost. You generally want more out of your 7 mana spells than a 6/4 haste, but it's not embarrassing. You could. If your deck lined up in such a way that like you were like making a bunch of power stones with nothing to do with it, and so you're like, well, now I'll play this automaton or something like that. I wouldn't look sideways at you, but I will say you generally want much more out of your 7 mana spell than a 6/4 haste. So I would say the minority of the time that you're going to do it, but it is like it's possible that you put this in your deck without it, but I don't recommend it in most cases. This is generally a red card, and as the red 3/2 haste with the upside of like, you get to play this as like a 6/4 haste sometimes when you have the mana for it. I think it's pretty good. I think it's like a C. Okay, sorry, I was just making sure I was recording. Got nervous for a second. All right, up next we have a Boulder Branch Golem. Boulder Branch Golem, another prototype card. So for 7 mana, it's a 6/5. When it enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to its power. Well, it's a lot of life. And then prototype, it's a 4 mana 3/3, same deal. This card's okay. A 7 mana 6/5 gain 6 is actually pretty decent. It's a little on the small side, but 6 life is a lot in like a more defensive deck. It's just that the 6/5 size is a little bit small. But if you think back to like what was it, like the Mossbeard Ancient? That was a 7/7 gained 5, and it had trample, so the stats were way better, but you also gained like a little bit less life, and it didn't have the option to caps it as a cheaper 4 mana 3/3. The funny thing about this one is I almost like it more on the 7 mana side because a 4 mana 3/3 gain 3, it's just not incredible. Like a 4 mana 3/3 is just too small to ever really be happy with it, even if you're gaining 3 off of it. I kind of don't like this card. I think it's like a C minus, maybe even a D plus. It's decent enough in your green decks that like you can probably play it, but I just wouldn't be excited about casting this for the prototype size. It's just a 4 mana 3/3 is so anemic, even with the 3/3 the gain 3, and the 7 mana 6/5 is also just a little anemic. Though gaining 6 is a big difference. This is another one I don't think you're going to put this card in your deck unless you're playing green. And even if you're playing green, I think this is a weaker card. I think it's like a D plus C minus, but it can be acceptable sometimes. Like again, 6 life is nothing to sneeze at. Just 7 mana is a lot for that. All right, we have Clay Revenant. It is a 1 mana, 1/2 golem. Clay Revenant enters the battlefield tapped, okay. And then 3 mana, return Clay Revenant from your graveyard to your hand. This is a sacrifice deck synergy card, so you're not going to want to play this at all if you don't have the ability to pay the black mana. So it is a black card, okay. And even then, like the thing is, like, okay, so this has synergy in the sacrifice decks because it's like, oh, because the joke is you can sacrifice it and then just buy it back, so you have like semi-infinite sacrifice fodder for a bunch of mana. That said, like, I don't think that the sacrifice decks are gonna have like that hard of a time finding fodder between soldier tokens and power stones and just other cards. That I don't think that you want to play a card this week just to have sacrifice fodder in your deck when it's so readily available in other forms. Maybe this falls into the camp of I built the sacrifice themed deck and didn't get there with enough sacrifice fodder, so I will play this weak card in order to make my deck work. I wouldn't want to play this normally. 1 mana 1/2 is basically nothing. I've mentioned like just like chumping a couple of times. This is a chump master, but it's actually no, it's not, because it enters the battlefield tapped. So they even got around that because you can't even like reliably like play this, block a creature, buy it back, play this, block a creature, buy it back, because it enters the battlefield tapped. So it's not even good at that. This looks like an F to me, and then you will play it on occasion if you are really heavy in the sacrifice theme and didn't get there with enough other stuff to make the sacrifice synergies worth it. All right, Coastal Bulwark. It is a 2 mana defender. Oh man, you guys know I love defenders. Coastal Bulwark gets +2/+0 as long as you control an island. So it's actually a blue card, basically. And then for 2 mana, tap Surveil 1. This looks like a D plus to me. So I don't like defenders really at all very much, because the whole thing about creatures is like, I mean, yeah, blocking is good, and maybe you're not an aggro deck, so like in a control style deck, like a 2 mana 3/3 does like block decently well, but not being able to block or not being able to attack is just such a major cost. It is such a bigger cost on your creatures than you think, because creatures have a lot of weaknesses actually. You know, even if you're trying to defend against other creatures, like they can get knocked out of the way with removal spells, they can die to pump spells, yada yada. And so, but the ability to attack like adds like a lot of value. So when a creature has defender, I mean, obviously not attacking is a drawback. It is what I'm getting at is it's really a bigger drawback than it seems. Defenders hurt your deck. Like it just like because there's a lot of situations where even if you go into the game like I am the defensive control deck, there's a lot of situations where the right thing to do is pressure your opponent. And this just can never do that. Again, it's only a blue card. I think I would never ever play this if I wasn't playing blue, for one, because just the 2 mana 1/3 is such a weak body. Like it's so bad. So having it go up to a 3/3 is probably a lot better. You're gonna have to like put a gun to my head to make me like play this as without blue in my deck. What I will say for it is the 2 mana tap Surveil 1 ability is kind of decent. It'll set up your graveyard synergies. It'll fix the top of your library. That's nothing to sneeze at. So if you are playing blue, you are playing like a defensive control deck, especially if you got control synergies, or I'm sorry, control synergies, graveyard synergies. Yeah, okay. You can play it. Maybe your mileage may vary. Maybe you like the defender cards more than I do. I just think defender is a big weakness. I think that this is like a D plus, and it can sneak into your deck sometimes if you're particularly controlling. All right, here we have a combat courier. Combat Courier is a construct for 1 mana. It's a 1 mana 1/1. For 2 mana, sacrifice Combat Courier, draw a card, and it has Unearth blue. What do I think of this little dork? It's like the slowest, most awkward divination I've ever seen. Because it's like so mana intensive to like, you play it as the 1 mana 1/1, and then you can like pay 2 to sacrifice it. So you basically paid as much of a divination just to cycle it. And then you could pay a full divination's cost again for a blue and 2 to get the other card back out of it. That's really really mana intensive way to draw cards. It is a cheap way to trigger your artifact synergies. I don't have much more good to say about it though. This is like a D plus to me too. And again, I would never play this if I couldn't play the blue Unearth cost, so it's basically a blue card. There's a world, I suppose, where like if you really care about getting artifacts in play, like this can be reasonable, I suppose. I just think it's like so mana intensive to actually do anything. The 1 mana 1/1 just doesn't do anything, and to get what you're supposed to get out of this card, which is like a bunch of card draw, it's just not great. Maybe if your opponent's attacking with a bunch of 2/1s, you can like use the 1 mana, like the front end, to like trade with one of their 2 power like 2/1 or something like that, and then later draw a card for 3. It just seems really weak overall, though. I think it's like a D plus. All right, one of our first absolutely gigantic fat boys here. We have a Depth Charge Colossus, very imposing art. Just so chonky, I like it. So it is a 9 mana Dreadnought. It's a 9/9. Depth Charge Colossus doesn't untap during your untap step. 3, untap Depth Charge Colossus. Or you could play it as a 4 mana 6/6. Hmm. Well, the first thing I'll say is this is one of the first prototypes that I think would be reasonably acceptable to play if you aren't blue, because the blue side of it is like not even like that insane. Like cheaping it as a 6 mana 6/6. That's okay. Like that's a really big creature, but the untap and the doesn't untap and then untaps like ability, it hurts. But I would say that there have been like a number of cards that have like fit this archetype before in Magic, and this one is like one of the least painful because it should be relatively easy to pay the untap with Power Stones, you know, and so like it might not actually hurt that bad to have this thing. But then if you play the prototype side, it's like just a 6 mana 6/6 that's awkward, and so I don't really like that. Whereas like a 9/9 is like actually gigantic. So if you can play it for the 9 mana cost, it's like you play it for like 6 out of like not desperation exactly, but like when you need to, but hopefully you're playing this for 9. That said, for 9 mana, it's just a 9/9 with an awkward untap attached to it. If you're going really going off of Power Stones, though, the reason I say that this would be more acceptable is because like when you do get this in play, I mean it's a gigantic 9/9. Like that's like it's like so huge. It's like and then at that point, like the untap like just doesn't hurt you as bad because it's like I don't know. It's just it's you already have all the mana that you need. You know. Um, this looks like a C minus to me. It's like probably fine to include in your blue decks. If you really need something to do with your Power Stones, you could possibly play it in a non-blue deck. Um, I think all of these huge artifact creatures get a little bit of a boost because of Power Stones. So I think this should be mentioned here too. Like when you cast this, you could cast this ostensibly on like turn 4 or something like that, and then you have like a 4 mana 6/6. And when you have that, like yeah, it has like the untap problem, but it also just like kind of stonewalls your opponent if you cast that this early, right? And if you have the Power Stones, like it's actually not that bad. So the fact that you can like ramp all of these cards out, like basically every artifact spell in the set has like inherent ramp built into it. They are all cheaper than the cost would suggest on their printed cost. And that makes them all way better, which is typically like if Power Stones didn't exist, obviously they do, but if they didn't, like a lot of these cards, including Death Charge Colossus, would just be stone cold unplayable. Like I would just never want to play this card. But because of the fact that like I can run this out early, earlier than you would think, it actually like all of them approach playability way more than you would think. So I think it's like a C minus. All right, we have Dredging Claw. Dredging Claw is an equipment. Oh boy, for 2 mana, a creature gets +1/+0 and has Menace. Okay. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may attach Dredging Claw to it, and it has an equip of black and 1. So clearly you got to be playing black. This one is basically like the Aeronaut whatever armament or whatever the heck that card was. I mean, it's like the same. Like flying is better than Menace typically. But But this does have this like unique ability where like if you're unearthing stuff all the time, it like makes all your unearths better. That said, I think that this is like an F as well. I wouldn't be pumped to play this card. Even if you do like have the unearth deck, like how much better, like do you need to play this like awkward card to make all your unearth spells better? I don't know. I don't know. If you're really going off with unearth, I suppose you could play this Dredging Claw, because I mean once you have it in play, like 2 mana early on in the game, and then you like do a bunch of unearths, and like all of them have like an additional power and can't be blocked as easily. I suppose that is a thing. So if you have like a really good unearth deck, like it's not unreasonable to play this, but it's still only like a C minus there. Like I think this equipment is just like so low impact and expensive that unless you are doing that thing with it, it's just not great. All right, Energy Refractor. It's a artifact for 2. When Energy Refractor enters the battlefield, draw a card. Okay, cool. And then 2, add 1 mana of any color. What do I think of this? So there's a couple use cases for this. First of all, it says draw a card on it, so it's really easy to fit into your deck. It'll trigger your artifact synergies, and then you'd also be happy. It's really good sacrifice fodder, all that kind of good stuff. You know, it has like all like the convenience of a Power Stone because it just replaces itself while doing something different, which is it can fix for you, which is a little bit nice. But I have a feeling that splashing is going to be the minority in this set. Like every now and then you'll do it, but it's not like amazing or anything like that. What I think that this actually does is allow you to turn your Power Stones into real mana. And so I would say that if you have a bunch of Power Stones, not a lot to do with them, or trying to fix colors, both of the, or just have like a bunch of artifact synergies or a bunch of sacrifice synergies, all of these things make this card acceptable. It doesn't do a lot, but it does like a bunch of tiny little glue stuff that you can include this card in your deck. It's like a C minus. Doesn't really do anything special. It's kind of like just air and filler in your deck, but if you have like a bunch of it, like kind of fits with a bunch of the different synergies that are going on in the set, so it's reasonable to include in your deck, you know. It's also perfectly cuttable too, like if you have like enough stuff going on, because it just is kind of adds air to your deck. Goblin Firebomb is an artifact for 1. It has flash. 7 to tap, sacrifice Goblin Firebomb, destroy target permanent. This is only okay. That is a really expensive ability. This is a spell, kind of like the spells that I mentioned where you only play them if you're like playing a synergy based deck and you didn't get there with the specific synergy pieces, and so they become like the bad synergy pieces that make your deck work. This is just like a bad removal spell that that you can play if you didn't get good removal. I think it's poor enough that like it's not the kind of thing that you just play if you're looking for artifact synergies, like, because that ability is so expensive just to be a removal spell. Like this card is just going to sit on the battlefield and do nothing a lot, and then eventually you can like mega tap out to like destroy one thing. It's just not very good. It's so basically I think it's like a D, but you can play it sometimes if you're like, I'm a control deck and I make some Power Stones, but I got like no removal, so I have to be able to deal with like enemy permanents. You can play a Goblin Firebomb. I don't think I would ever be happy about it. A Goring Warplow. All right, so it's a 6 mana construct that is a 5/4 with Death Touch, or for prototype, it's a black and 1/1/1 Death Touch. Okay, yeah, I like this card. I like this card. So this is one that I think I would only play this if I was playing black. I don't think a 6 mana 5/4 Death Touch is really something I'd be excited about if I was like a non-black color, because I think the primary form of playing the Goring Warplow is going to be the prototype version, where it's the 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch, and you're just going to trade it off with stuff in the early game. And I think that that's like the primary mode of this card, because it's the closest to like a reasonable rate. A 6 mana 5/4. Even with Death Touch, it's not an amazing rate. And this is the kind of thing where you're playing it as a 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch to like just trade off with stuff on the ground. And then if you get to the later stage of the game, then you get to play it as an actual 5/4. And so like a 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch is a little overrated. Like it's like there's like 1 mana 1/1 Death Touches that you play all the time, but it's not so much so that it's like embarrassing. It's really only a defensive spell, you know. You're not attacking with that very well. But yeah, you just play it early on in the game and you just trade it off with stuff. And then if you draw this later, because the downside of those spells is like they're so weak in the later stages of the game when it's like like turn 15 and I draw my 1/1, But this isn't. It's a 5/4, and 6 isn't like so outlandish. Like it's not so expensive that it actually is like really reasonable to like cast this on the non-prototype side. So I think that this is like a like a C. I think it's like a C. Like it's a little overrated on both sides, but this is one where like the combination of each is like so different. Unlike Depth Charge Colossus, where it's like not that different to play it for the 6/6 size or the 9/9 size. Like it's like kind of the same card. This is like two different cards, and both of them slightly overrate, but fine. C range. But I'll only play it if I'm playing black. All right, Mine Worker. And this is like part of a cute cycle here that's evocative of the Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. Mine Worker is a 2-mana assembly worker, and it's a 2/1. Tap, you gain 1 life. If you control a creature's name Power Plant Worker and Tower Worker, you gain 3 life instead. Okay, this is a good little dude. Just a 2-mana 2/1 is pretty acceptable because you can just trade it off or start beating early, like, and it's an artifact, so like not great, but like that's an acceptable rate on a creature. And then tap, gain 1 life is actually like a solid ability. Like, it's not like great or anything like that, but like you could cast this guy early, either get some attacks in or just trade it off, or if it just gets bricked up, then you just start gaining life with it. And that's not like amazing or anything, but this card is like perfectly acceptable. I think it's like in the C- range, not great, but I think you'll play Mine Workers and in your control decks, and they're going to be perfectly fine. Trade it off with something or just gain a bunch of life with it, and I think you'll be pretty happy. All right, Mishra's Juggernaut is a 5-mana Juggernaut. It's a 5/3 with trample. It attacks each combat if able, and has Unearth for 6, 5 in red. Okay, so I don't really like this card. Attacks each combat if able actually is a huge downside. Even on cards where you intend on attacking with, like sometimes you just want to like save stuff to like, have like a big alpha attack later. And the fact that this attacks each turn of able and has a 3 toughness means that it's just going to trade down so often. Even if it has trample on it, your opponent's going to have a 3-mana 3/2, and you're just going to like trade down and then maybe get a couple points of damage in, and it's like yippee. And then it has the Unearth side. It makes it a little more acceptable. I probably wouldn't want to play this at all if I don't have access to the red for the Unearth. It makes it a little bit better. I think it's like a D plus. 5 mana for a 5/3 trample is just not great stats, and then you have to run it in, no choice, to whatever stupid thing your opponent has on the other side of the table that'll block it. And then like the win that you get is you get to do that one more time later on in the game. It could be kind of annoying. It's like a D plus. I don't think that this card's very good, but it's like you can play it. Yeah. Or we have Power Plant Worker, a 5-mana 4/4, which is a good start for an artifact creature. 3. Power Plant Worker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you control a creature's named Mine Worker and Tower Worker, put 2+1/+1 counters on Power Plant Worker instead. Activate only once each turn. Okay, so actually, I forgot to mention this on the Mine Worker. I'm evaluating these without, if you basically aren't getting the Tron going. The Tron being like, getting all 3 of them, like Urzatron. But if you get all 3 of them, obviously they become way better. I would say don't worry about that, but if you want to go in on that, if you're about to go in on that, they do get a lot better, but I would say don't like sweat over it, and evaluate these chiefly as if they don't have that ability, okay? And this card is actually like kind of decent. Like, first of all, it's a 5-mana 4/4, but it's an artifact, which means you can cast it for a lot cheaper typically. And so then, I mean, if you have like 1 Power Stone, you get to cast this as a 4-mana 4/4. By the way, that's kind of how I think about Power Stones, just because of the way that they work. Is like, not that it's like, I have extra mana, but it's kind of like, because you can't use the mana for them on like anything other than non-artifact spells, I don't think of them as like a mana source. I think of them as like they make my artifact spells cheaper or my abilities cheaper, is like kind of how I actually think about that, rather than like generating mana. Does that make sense? It's kind of, it's like the same way of thinking about it either way, but that's kind of how I envision this. So yeah, if you have just 1 Power Stone, like, right, this is like a 4-mana 4/4, which is a great stats. And then it has an ability that like actually makes this thing really annoying in combat. Like, it attacks like a 6/6, and you can only do it like once each turn, but like it actually like kind of like really clubs way up. I think this is fine. I think this is like a C, maybe a C minus. It's not insane or anything, but it probably will put in like better work, like with threat of activation, than it will seem. And just being an artifact is like major bonus points. That like a lot of these artifact cards are a little underrated, because that's just the nature of colorless cards generally. But they make up for like being underrated, where they would typically be normally underrated in a lot of sets. They actually way make up for that by being artifacts, both in that they trigger your artifact cards and they can be cast with Power Stones, and so they pick the rate back up on that end. So it's almost like they're not underrated for like what they are. And that makes Power Plant Worker, I think it's like a C. I think it's like a C. Pretty solid 5-drop. that, again, it's really annoying to get into combat with because it'll often like at least threaten to be a 6/6. And of course, if you get the Tron going, this thing becomes gigantic, really annoying. All right, Rust Goliath is a 10 mana 10/10 reach trample construct, or for 2 green and 3, it's a 3/5. Okay. I think this is one of the better prototype cards we've seen so far. A double green and 3/5 reach trample spell is solid. That's a solid defensive body. Like that's a really good spider, basically. Really tough to attack into on the air or in the ground, and 5 mana is a reasonable cost for that. So I really kind of like that. And again, it's an artifact, comes with all the bonuses of like the artifact and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And then a 10 mana 10/10, 10's a lot, but if you get there, it's a 10/10, and it has the important keyword trample. And I've already talked about trample a couple times in this set. I think it's going to be a really important team. I think trample is going to be so important. So this one, again, you really have to get there. I love it in my green decks. I think it's like a C+ in my green decks. Yeah, I think it's like a C+ in the green decks. And if you're really getting there on Power Stones, this is an acceptable card to put like as like your big finisher in a non-green Power Stone deck, because a 10/10 Trampler is just that game ending that if you can get to 10 mana with Power Stones, I can see you casting this in your non-green deck, though it does go way down in that regard. It's like so expensive, right? Also an excellent reanimate target. I think the body on this one is just so good that this is one of your best options for getting this into play some other way than just like paying its mana cost, whether you like play one of the reanimate spells, or again, you just run it out with like, you have like a million Power Stones, you can run this one out. The 10/10 Trample really does get there. Like it closes the game out way better than a lot of the other cards that we've looked at here. So again, it's really, really, really super expensive, but if you can do it, it's worth it. And I really like this as a green spell as well. So yeah, C+ in your green decks, really risky C- synergy finisher in your non-green decks. All right, we got Scrapwork Cohort. It's a 4 mana 3/1 soldier. Oh, it's a soldier, and it creates a 1/1 colorless soldier when it comes into play. And it has Unearth for a white and 2, so it gets to attack as a 3/1 and leaves another 1/1 behind, which is really cute. This card's great. I think it's like a solid C, or maybe even a little bit better in your white decks. I think you could even reasonably play it in a non-white deck because it creates like 4 power for 4 mana across 2 bodies and triggers double artifact synergies when you play it. So even just doing that on its front end, and of course you'd be able to cast it for cheaper. Like you cast this for 3 in a Power Stone. Like I feel like you've really kind of done it. So even if you don't have the Unearth, I think that Scrapwork Cohort is like a really pretty solid card in your non-white decks. And then with the white ability, it gets like even better. I think this card's like a C+. I think this card's a C+. And not only is it a C+, I think this is a card that is, it's thinking of draft specifically, this is going to be a card that you're going to be happy to pick up early in draft because it's going to fit in just about all of your decks and have lots of synergies, soldier synergies, artifact synergies, sacrifice synergies, all that kind of stuff. And then if you could pay the Unearth, it gets even better than that. I think it's like a C+. I think this is a really pretty solid role player card that's going to be pretty highly valued. Scrapwork Mutt. Duh, good boy. It is a 2 mana 2/1 dog. So when Scrapwork Mutt enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Okay, and it has Unearth for 2. Okay, so this guy's solid. 2 mana 2/1, great. With a little bit of looting, I've already talked enough about how, like, well, technically Rummage, but I've already talked enough about how that is like a really solid ability in this set specifically, and the fact that you're not like overpaying for this really that much is pretty good. And then I really like the Unearth on this because even though when you unearth this, it might be difficult to attack with a 2 mana 2/1. At that stage of the game because like they might just have like a soldier token to block it or whatever. It also can like it triggers the loot again, so you can like turn one of your lands in your hand into a real spell, which is like a really nice like little bonus off of the Unearth. You can play this if you're not playing red. I think it's a perfectly acceptable if unexciting card. And if you're playing red, it gets that much better. I think that this is a C. I think it's a solid C. All right, Scrapwork Rager. I like that it's like basically a Phyrexian Rager, but like looking a little worse for wear. It's got like a bunch of like arrows and swords stuck into it. It's pretty nice. So it's a 4 mana Phyrexian Horror 2/2. When Scrapwork Rager enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 1 life. I think this card's great. 4 mana 2/2 draw card is already just like an acceptable spell, you know, in a lot of like game states, you know. I think that it's pretty good, and this of course has a lot more going for it, being an artifact. Just when I say being an artifact, please just remember, like I'm talking about synergy, like just artifact trigger synergies and power stones and everything that comes with it. You know, so just yeah, it's an artifact, and then it has the unearth. So like this one card like can draw you like multiple cards. And is like a 2/2 that triggers all your artifact stuff. I think this is great. This looks like a C plus to me. I would definitely play this card in my non-black artifact or in my non-black decks that care about artifacts, or even if they don't. I think it's just an acceptable card to play in your non-black decks, like period. And then if you have black, like this becomes even better. It's like a C in your non-black decks, and then a C plus in your black decks. I think that this card's actually really excellent. All right, Stone Retrieval Unit is a construct for 4 mana. It's a 2/3. When Stone Retrieval Unit enters the battlefield, create a tap Power Stone token. Okay, so 4 mana, 2/3. It's a little anemic, but it does make 2 artifacts, and one of them is a Power Stone. I think that this is like, depending on your synergies, this is anywhere from like a C minus to a C. Yeah, I think you want to really care about what it's doing for you to play this card. But like, it's got enough synergy going on that like this could just be like a solid C in your decks. Not much to say about this one because this card is literally just a synergy piece in decks that care about the things that this card is doing. Um, and so it's really going to depend. But the thing is, like, virtually all of the decks, except for like the Soldier aggro deck, care about what this card's doing. So I think it's just like a solid C. Just like a solid C, and a lot of decks are going to want it. You have to be careful because the 4 mana 2/3 is pretty anemic, but it's not even that bad. It makes the Power Stone, triggers all your synergies. Yeah, I think it's a C. All right, Supply Drop. It's a 3 mana artifact with Flash. When Supply Drop enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And then 4 mana and tap, sacrifice Supply Drop, draw a card. Yo, I think this card's kind of cool. Um, it's like it's an artifact combat trick, and then later you can like draw, get your card back off of it. I think this card's sweet. It's a combat trick in every color too, and it's like, and this is something that's rare. So obviously all these trigger all your artifact synergies. I already mentioned that, right? However, not a lot of them do so at instant speed, which can be really annoying. So this card is actually like kind of obnoxious. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad it exists, but in some ways, I'm like super annoyed that it exists because every color can play this. I'm basically going to have to be paranoid if is 3 mana untapped. Um, that my opponent can trigger their artifact synergies at instant speed at any time. And this card is like far from embarrassing because not only can they do that, but they get a pump, and it's like really safe for them to play that because they can just draw the card off of it later. I think this is like a C plus just because it like pulls so much weight in so many directions. It's not like the card has like gigantic impact on its own, but it's going to be so useful like all the time that like and it just like does so many little things that add up that I actually think that this is like going to be like kind of a reasonably high pick card. Like every single combat step is going to be scary in every single color combination. Um and yeah, I just think it like carries like a lot of weight. So I'm gonna go with like C plus on this. The only downside could be that it is a little overcosted on the front end, and the draw card part's a little overcosted. But I don't think that that's the worst thing at all. I don't think that's the worst thing at all. I think that Supply Drop is really a really good and obnoxious card. All right, Swiftgear Drake is a 5 mana Drake. It's a 2/4 with flying and haste. And when Swiftgear Drake enters the battlefield, put up one target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. Um, I don't think that this card is good enough. I think it's like a D plus. 5 mana for a 2/4 flying haste is just it's a little too overpriced. It's pretty expensive for that body. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. A 4 mana 2/4 flyer is like not bad, but it's like not amazing either. And if you consider you have like one power stone, that's kind of what this is, and it has haste and it eats. Maybe it's like a C minus. You know, you can't have too many of these cards, but I guess it has enough going on. Like it's a decent defensive body, it's a decent aggressive body, and it busts up your opponent's graveyard synergies. Yeah, we'll go with C minus, but like I don't think you're gonna like prioritize this by any means. But I don't think it's embarrassing either. I think it's okay. But if you don't have power stones, like I don't think paying the full 5 mana for this is good. So you do want to have power stones to a degree because this one is like overcosted enough that I really do want to be casting it for cheaper than it otherwise reads. Because yeah, if you're just like tapping out for the full 5, nah, it's not good. It's definitely closer to the D range. All right, Takasia's Amulet is a 5 mana construct. It's a 4/4. When it leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life, and then has Unearth for a white and 3. Okay, so this one I definitely want to be only playing it in my white decks. I don't think this is good enough for just the 5 mana 4/4 gain 2 side. It's just too small. It's a little anemic. With the Unearth, it becomes decent. So with the caveat that you generally only want to be playing it in your white decks, it becomes like definitely in the D range if you're not playing white. In your white decks, this will ultimately like gain you 4, and it's a 4/4 that later attacks again as a 4/4. It's like a C minus. This doesn't really do anything exciting, but it is a decently sized creature that like bolsters your life a little bit. It's kind of close to the D plus, but like a C minus range in white, it's like more acceptable. This card's pretty unexciting though. All right, we got the final of the trio, the Tower Worker. It is a 3 mana assembly worker. It's a 1/3 with a reach, and it has tap, add 1 colorless. If you control creatures named Mine Worker and Power Plant Worker, add 3 colorless instead. Okay, a 3 mana 1/3 reach is not good stats. I'm not excited about that. And this has the same problem of what I was talking about with like the green black rare, where it's like if you're using it for the 1/3 reach body, it's hard to like use this for the mana ability. And a 3 mana like tap to add 1 is colorless is not great. It like doesn't even do the mana lift thing where like it adds mana of any color. I think this is like a D. I think this is like a D. I don't want to like again, it's so easy to like add 1 colorless and like in this set that I'm not really interested in like overpriced cards that do that. Um so I just wouldn't be excited about this card. If your opponent's like really trying to go to the skies or something like that, it's like an okay sideboard card, I suppose. But I think this is like kind of the worst of the worker cycle. I think it's like a D. I don't see myself playing this very much. Excuse me. All right, Veteran's Power Blade. It's a 3 mana equipment. Uh-oh. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. Equip soldier for a white, or just equip 2. Well, I think it's horrible if you're not playing white. So I wouldn't even ever look at this in my non-white decks. Even if you are playing white, so it only equips to soldiers, which is most of your white creatures. And it gets +2/+0. You do get to club up all your soldier tokens. They get to be like it's like a 3/1, then a 3/1, then a 3/1. But like I still don't even think it's that good. Like you're spending an entire card to do that. It's like a D plus. Like you can do that, but like there are boards where it's like, okay, say your opponent has like a 1/4. There are a couple 1/4s in the set. Well, now like changing like turning all your soldiers into 3/1s, like not even that's good. Because like they're still blocked up anyways. And now you spent this entire card on just making your soldiers better, and it doesn't even like successfully do that very well. I think that this card is like very poor. I'm gonna acknowledge my bias against equipment and give this card a begrudging D plus. I think to me it's an F. You're gonna have to. I don't like this card. I don't like equipment. I don't think that it's good. There are situations where it could be good. If you have like a bunch of flying soldiers, maybe, but I still don't like it. You're paying 4 mana to get the first +2/+0. I think it's an F. Play it and convince me I'm wrong, and maybe it's a D. I don't know. That's where I'm at with that. All right, on to the uncommons. All right, here we go with our first uncommon. We have Argivian Avenger. It is a 6 mana shapeshifter, 5/5, with the ability 1. Until end of turn, Argivian Avenger gets -1/-1 and gains your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or haste. Okay, all right, so this is very interesting. So first of all, I think that this is good enough, even if all that you could give it was flying, because it's like kind of like a minor dragon then. I mean, yeah, you have to pay, it's like a 6 mana 4/4 flyer that you have to pay a mana every turn. You know what I mean? So like right there, I think it's like fine. And then of course it does like a bunch of other things too, right? I mean, 6 mana 4/4 flyer, I suppose, is like definitely on the weaker side of like a big flyer, but like not the end of the world, depending on the board state and how fast things are going. Then yeah, it has all these other abilities too. Like sometimes like the right thing to do would be to like give it vigilance, or you can give it death touch to trade up with like a gigantic thing. 7 mana for a 4/4 haste is a lot worse. At the same time, this doesn't do anything too special. I'm gonna rate it at about a C minus maybe, because it is expensive, and I think that like at every point that you're giving it one of the abilities, not only is it like you paid 6 mana for a 4/4 with one of these abilities. So if you imagine it like imagine you paid this as a 6 mana 4/4 that has one of these. no matter what you overpaid for it. And then it's a little bit worse than that because you have to pay the mana to give the ability. And the abilities don't even work that well, like in combination. Like, I guess it's okay. Like you can like pay like 2 mana to make it a 3/3 flying vigilance so that it attacks as a 3/3 flyer and then like stays home on defense. And then if you even have another mana, then it's like, and then it can like death touch like whatever other thing. So like it's like I don't know, it all adds up to being an okay card, but it's basically overpriced all the time and demands more of your mana. So it's like a C minus because it does do a bunch of different things. And at a 6 mana 5/5, it's like not the end of the world, and then it can do these other things too. Even if like adding the abilities to these, none of it's like super incredible. It is versatile enough that yeah, it's like a C minus. All right, up next we've got Ashnod's Harvester. Kind of Phyrexian looking already. I don't really know if like there's anything to that, but it's kind of cool. It's creepy. It has sort of like a War of the Worlds vibe, the way it's like, like lifting, it's like a walker that's like picking these people up. So it's a 2 mana 3/1, okay. And whenever Ashnod's Harvester attacks, exile target card from a graveyard, and it has Unearth for a black and 1. So yeah, I think that this card's like pretty decent. Like I talked down on 2 mana 3/1s, and I still believe that. But it's like also like not the worst, and this is an artifact, so like it's better than some of the other ones that we've seen. And that ability is like kind of useful. It just eats your opponent's synergies. This is like it's just a synergy eater card. On top of like just being a cheap beater. Altogether, I think that this ends up being about a C. Yeah, the 2 mana 3/1 body is like kind of bad sometimes, but it's also fine sometimes. And then yeah, just being able to like make sure that your opponent's synergies don't work is actually like really pretty valuable. And then this is another one where it's acceptable to play this if you don't have the Unearth ability. In fact, the Unearth ability only adds a little bit. It's mostly going to, in an emergency, eat your opponent's graveyard card that you're scared about because unearthing into the 3/1 attacker. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not incredible either. Sorry. So yeah, I think that overall it's about a C level card, and I will play this in my non-black decks, though obviously it's better on my black decks. Combat Thresher. Well, look at this thing. What the heck? All right, so it is a 7 mana 3/3 double strike construct. When Combat Thresher enters the battlefield, draw a card, and it has prototype for a white and 2, and it is a 1/1. Well, I think this card's really pretty good. I mean, it says draw card on it, so it could be substantially worse than it is, and it would still be quite good. Like a 3 mana 1/1 double strike draw card, that's a solid card. Like that's really pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's like a little on the small side, but you also drew a card. Like, what do you want? Um, I think that you probably want to be playing white for this one. The 7 mana 3/3 double strike is okay, but it's still like that's a really small body, even though you get the card draw out of it. That I would be less excited to play this in my decks that aren't playing white, but you can. It's not the end of the world. You certainly can. But in your white decks, I think this card's incredible. It's really annoying, especially if you can power pump it in any way. Like it obviously has really good synergy with any kind of power pumps. And it just doesn't even need it that much because just the 1/1 double strike draw card for the 3 mana, if it had like no other, if it didn't have the main way to cast it, like the non-prototype way to cast it, I think it would still be an acceptable card. I think it's like a C plus. Because it's not like it's insane. Like the body doesn't like crush the game on either side. It doesn't really crush, but the fact that it is a nice solid body and then draws you a card like really adds to its power. So maybe even close to like the B minus range. Especially if you can power pump it, this becomes a really excellent card. All right, we have Cradle Clear Cutter. Oh, this guy's like serious, like a very spooky looking machine here. It's a 6 mana golem for a 3/6. Tap, add an amount of green equal to Cradle Clearcutter's power. And then it could also be played as a 3 mana 1/3. I don't like this card very much. This is another one of those cards where it's like, yeah, if you have like super expensive cards, like this can help you cast those really expensive cards. So first of all, I don't think I would ever play this in my non-green deck. So a 6 mana 3/6 is not good. And then even if it can like tap for 3 green, which if you're playing a non-green deck, like that's basically just colorless mana. And so it's like a 6 mana card that can help you cast your 9 mana cards, which there are so many ways to cast your 9 mana cards that don't involve playing a weak 6 mana card that's not really where I'm at. So I really don't like the main side of this. I kind of don't like either side of this card because the 3 mana 1/3 tap for green is also really weak. Like that's a really slow ramp card and a really small creature. I just think that it's funny because this card has like 4 modes kind of. It's like a 3 mana 1/3, also a 3 mana ramp for green, also a 6 mana 3/6, also a 6 mana tap for 3. And I think all 4 of the modes are like really weak and anemic enough that I really rate this card kind of poorly. I think it's like a D plus. It's not embarrassing. You can cast it. It does add a little versatility to your deck. It does smooth things out a little bit. But overall, like every option on this card is just so underrated that I just don't like it. I think it's like a D plus. All right, Philagi Dragon Engine. Okay. So it's an 8 mana dragon, 5/5 flying, and for 2, Philagi Dragon Engine gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And for prototype, you can cast it for a red and 2, and it's a 1/3. Okay. So one of the toughest things about these cards, and I've been talking about it for every one of the prototype cards, and it's really going to depend on. I think one of the biggest things I could potentially be wrong about is which of these you end up sticking in your deck if you can't use the prototype ability. I'm very willing to admit right now that I could be wrong in all directions for all of these. It's really tough to tell. I think this one is close to good enough. 8 mana for a 5/5 flying is way overpriced, but it is like once you get it on the table, it will kill your opponent. Especially if you could cast it for the 8 mana spell, the 8 mana size, you can pump that same mana into the power pump, the fire breathing ability, to really just like start like you could like 2-shot your opponent with this basically. So it is close enough to being strong enough that I think you will play it in your non-red deck, so obviously it's way better in the red decks. In the red decks, a 3 mana 1/3 artifact flyer that you can also pump with fire breathing, it's fine. It's not like insane or anything. But I think that it's like a perfectly acceptable creature. If a little sad. I think it's like a C. I think it's like a C. In your red decks, it's like definitely a little bit better because I think while the prototype size of it is like a little anemic, though not bad, the fact that when you're playing red, you have the prototype and like the main version of it, really, really does add a lot because the two sides are like so different that it really does like add up to a good card. Um, and it's a strong enough finisher, unlike the Thresher, the Combat Thresher, is that what the card's called? Yeah, Combat Thresher, Cradle Clear Cutter. I think it's a strong enough finisher just as an 8 mana spell because that's really what it comes down to is like if I cast this in my like non-red decks for its main cost, is this going to be a like finisher worth getting to that amount of mana? And a 5/5 flyer with a power pump ability on it does reach that, even if this is really expensive. And so obviously way better. It's like a C in your red decks, and then it's like all of these I'm gonna put as like cast it if you need to in a non-color cards. Even if I say that they're castable in the like non-red decks or whatever, it's very much a like I hope you have something better to do, but you can do it for virtually all of these. Okay, and so that's how I'll rate this one. Like seeing your red decks, desperate finisher in your non-red decks. Haywire Might. Okay, these guys kind of remind me of like little like pomegranate seeds. Like it almost makes me like hungry a little bit. Like they look like they're tasty. I don't know. Or like a ring pop. It's like a big mechanical ring pop. Yeah, I'd eat it. All right, so it's a 1 mana 1/1 insect. Oh, gross. When Haywire Might dies, you gain 2 life. Okay. Sacrifice Haywire Might or green and sacrifice Haywire Might. Exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Oh, okay, okay. So obviously you really want to play this in your green decks. That's a green spell because 1 mana 1/1 gain 2, not good enough. But it's actually like a removal spell and an artifact creature and a life gain thing in your green deck. So this is actually like it's like a C plus. Because so it's not creature artifact or not creature enchantment. So the targets are a lot more limited. Those do exist, but you're not going to be like guaranteed to find targets. But if your opponents do have a target, like it's actually like really quite good. Um, because yeah, just like a 1 mana 1/1 gain 2, and then on top of that you get to like and it's an exile effect, and it can hit like both not artifacts and enchantments. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, like looking through the set, I think that it is going to be likely enough that your opponent has one of the two kinds of permanent types in most decks, though this can miss. I think in most decks they will have something to point this at, and which makes it good. And a lot of the cards that fit into this camp, non-creature artifacts and non-creature enchantments, a lot of times they're like some of your better spells. They're like removal spells and stuff, and I don't know, at least in the enchantments, or they're just like really excellent like synergy pieces and things like that. So I think this is good enough. Especially if you care about like having just like a cheap artifact creature in play, there is a risk of just this not finding any targets, because if you only play it for the 1 mana 1/1 gain 2 side, it's just not really worth the card. So hopefully they have something to point it at. So this might go closer to like sideboard card direction, though it's not an embarrassing card to main deck. It's a little risky. You gotta watch it. All right, here we have Heavyweight Demolisher. It is a 7 mana construct, an 8/6 with Menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, tap Heavyweight Demolisher unless you pay 3, and it has Unearth for 2 red and 6. Okay, so this one I would definitely say is probably acceptable if you don't have the Unearth, though it is way better if you do. Because an 8/6 Menace is like a beater of a creature, even if you have to like tap to like pay 3. The thing is, because it's an 8/6 with Menace, you're going to be attacking with it a lot. And so like, yeah, maybe you have to like pay that for like 1 turn, but it's already when you have like 1,000,000 mana, so it's not going to hurt you that bad. And then ideally, like your opponent will be like, well, I can't keep just taking 8, and so they will trade with something to get it off the board. So I don't expect that you're going to be like paying 3 mana for like the entirety of the game. That said, 7 mana is a lot, and it doesn't really do a lot to defend you. So this does just fit into like the big finisher category. The Unearth on this is actually really kind of nice, because so the Unearth on some of the smaller, more anemic creatures is like a little less meaningful, because it's a lot less likely that unearthing this is going to like bust open the board and like necessarily get through for a good attack. Whereas the Unearth on this, if you cast that, it's like they now have to deal with the hasty 8/6 Menace. That's a much bigger impact of a card, right? So I would say in your red decks, this is like a C tier finisher. And then in your non-red decks, this is like a C- or a D+ tier finisher, but you can cast it. I would want to be red, because I think that the Unearth on this like really does add a lot to the card. But not so much so that you can't cast it in the other colors. It's also much more of an aggressive finisher than like a it's not a very good defensive body. You want to be attacking with this, so keep that in mind too. All right, Hulking Metamorph is a 9 mana 7/7 shapeshifter. You may have Hulking Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact creature in addition to its other types, and its power and toughness are equal to Hulking Metamorph's power and toughness. Okay, and then it has prototype 2 blue and 2, and it's a 3/3. Well, this is going to be really super contingent on what cool stuff you have to copy. Though once you have good stuff to copy, this is actually pretty good. I'd have to look through the set and see what kind of really excellent synergy stuff that there is. Like what kind of stuff that like having this be a an appropriate like body to like also copy an ability, like where it becomes worth it. I'll say this, in any of your blue decks, I think that this is about a C. And then if you have really good synergy things with it, it can go up from there. But just being able to cast this as like a 2 blue 2/2 3/3 that can like copy abilities of your creatures or artifacts is going to be good enough in like virtually all your blue decks that you will probably never cut this from a blue deck. As a 9 mana 7/7 that can do this, I think it's a lot worse. I probably wouldn't cast this in my non-blue decks unless I have like really sick copy targets. I think this is chiefly a blue card, because it's just a 9 mana 7/7 is expensive enough that like I'm just not pumped about it. And so I'd have to be copying something really sick and giving this something really good. So I'd primarily read this as a blue card. In your blue decks is probably like a nice C tier card. You'll cast it as its prototype a lot more, and then every now and then you'll have the mana to cast as like a 7/7 with a sick copy. And the copy like doesn't have to be too good to like make the 3/3 part worth it. I mean, you just give it flying, and that's actually like an incredible card or whatever, right? So yeah, I think it's a solid C. All right, Iron Claw Crusher. It is a 7 mana worm. It's a 4/6. Whenever Iron Claw Crusher attacks, target attacking creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is Iron Claw Crusher's power. And then it has prototype double green and 2, and it's a 2/5. Okay, so right away, this is another one that I put like just in like the green camp. I don't think I would want to cast this as a 7 mana 4/6, even with the ability in my non-green decks. In my green decks, I actually like this card quite a bit, because double green and 2/5 artifact creature. That's a reasonable size body, and when it attacks, it gives either another creature +2/+0, or itself can be a 4/5 attacker. If this is attacking as a 4/5 for 4, that's actually a perfectly solid, acceptable creature. That's like really pretty good. And then also like it has the added synergy of like, oh, you have a flyer, so this attacks as a 2/5, and then you give your flyer +2/+0. Or like let's see, because it has 5 toughness, it can actually bounce off a lot of other creatures. So you don't have to worry about giving this the power pump on its own. You can like help one of your more anemic creatures actually attack. Like if they have like a 4/4, you can instead like give one of your 2/2s like 2 power, so both of these creatures can attack into the 4/4. Makes sense. And then the added gravy of like casting this as the 4/6 and either attacking as an 8/6 or giving another creature +4 is like really pretty good. I put this as about a C2. I think in most of my green decks, I'm probably not going to cut this card. I don't want to play it in my non-green decks. And it doesn't do anything like that absurd, but it's like going to be like a nice mid-game role player. It's like a C. All right, Levitating Statue. For 2 mana, it's an artifact with flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Levitating Statue. And for 2, Levitating Statue becomes a 1/1 construct artifact creature until end of turn. This card's kind of interesting. So basically, you want to cast this in like your like prowess-based decks, and this actually becomes like a real threat, kind of. Like you cast this early, sure it doesn't do anything, but then as the game goes on, you cast like a couple of non-creature spells, and then this turns into like a real threat. Like you get 2 counters on this thing, and it's like now it's like a 3/3 flyer. It can be really awkward. It's really bad off the top late in the game. And you do want to be doing the non-creature thing, and it costs more mana to eventually have it start attacking. But yeah, you cast like a couple non-creature spells, and this will be a real threat. Like you can even get up to like a 4/4/5/5, and you like your 2-drop is like now like attacking for like 4 or 5 in the air. Like that's really pretty good. So sequencing issues, non-counter spell or not counter spell, non-creature spell clause on it. Okay. But it does fit into like any color deck. You know, you're probably going to have non-creature spells on all your decks. This definitely goes in like a more controlling deck. This is like kind of a control finisher more so than it is like a like an aggro card or something like that. I think it rates at about a C minus, but in some decks it can be a really nice role player where you cast it early and then just like do your thing. You cast removal spells, you cast card draw spells, and then eventually you start attacking in the air for 4 or 5. It also is like safe from sorcery speed removal for the most part, which is like kind of cute. So yeah, a little awkward. You definitely want to be doing the thing the deck asks you to do. I think it is much more of a control card, simply because yeah, you'll want to like wait for this to get big, and then in the control decks, that's when it's going to be safer for you to just like the 2 mana is not going to hurt as much. Whereas like if you're trying to end the game quickly, you probably don't have like enough mana to regularly be putting 2 into this, and you didn't cast a bunch of non-creature spells. But yeah, this can be like a role player control finisher that's like kind of cute in some decks. So yeah, a little awkward to get there. It's not going to fit in many decks at all, but when it does, it's actually like a solid finisher. Well, C minus probably. All right, Mask of the Jade Crafter. For 2 mana, it's an artifact. X and tap, sacrifice Mask of the Jade Crafter. Create an XX colorless golem artifact creature token. Activate only as a sorcery, and it has Unearth for a green and 2. Well, I'll tell you on the front end, I don't think it's amazing that you can play it without the green. The thing is, like, XX creatures are basically generally underrate for every point on the curve that you can cast them. 1 mana, 1/1, 2 mana, 2/2, 3 mana, 3/3. Actually, maybe that's not true. They're just not special. Like it's like at every single point they're like only okay. And the thing is, you have to pay 2 up front for this and then play that. The Power Stones do allow you to like dump mana into this a lot faster than you normally might be able to. So you can like, even though it's like not a mana efficient play, you can like maybe get 7 mana into this thing faster than you might be able to otherwise. And then the Unearth is interesting because it allows you to do it again, but at a much reduced rate. I think in your green decks, actually, this does do enough that like it actually becomes kind of good. And it's like, it's probably like a C in your green decks, you know? Because what you pay 2, you play this as like your 2-drop, and then on your next turn, it's like, oh, you can play this as like a 3 mana 3/3. Or late in the game, this actually like has the versatility to be like a 6/6 or a 7/7. Actually, maybe this card's a little bit better than I think, and it actually is like a C plus in your green decks. I think you definitely want to be in the green decks because it just is only like fine in your non-green decks. Like it really at any point, it's like basically an overcosted X whatever to like do this, especially because like it takes a turn later. Like say you draw this like off the top late in the game, you know, then it's like it's not a creature until you can like fully like activate it. And so like say you're like, I need a creature this turn, and then you draw this card and you have like 7 mana available to you. Well, this is like a 7 mana 5/5 in that case if you need to turn it into a creature that turn. So that's like kind of bad. So you want to be able to like pay 2 and then fully tap into it later to really get what you want to get out of it. Um, that being said, I think that the versatility is enough that actually maybe I'm a little higher on it than I was when I first read it, because being able to like make it a 4-mana 4/4 early in the game, but also it could be like a 7/7 later in the game, and then also you can do the same thing with the Unearth ability even later in the game, probably adds up to being like a C plus in some decks. But there are some decks I really want to be green to do this, and it's only adequate. It's like more like a C minus in my non-green decks, but it's still castable there. Yeah, I think that that's where that lands. I'm unsure about this one. This is another one where it really depends on the speed of the format and like how much you're going to be able to like wait and see how much mana you can tap into this and all that kind of stuff. This one's going to be really contextual on how the format plays, I think. All right, Mishra's Research Desk is an artifact for 1. 1 and tap, sacrifice Mishra's Research Desk, exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. And then it has Unearth for red and 1. Well, I think this is a red spell. I super don't like this in your non-red decks because it's like the worst selection possible. It's like 1 mana and then another 1 mana investment, and then you get to choose from the top 2 cards of your library, but you have to play one immediately, and you hurt yourself by like, you know, using the mana for it already. That you could do it like on the end of your opponent's turn. So it's like horrible selection if you aren't playing red. But if you are playing red, it's like kind of a cute like card draw spell. Like you do this once earlier in the game, and then later in the game you get to like find another card off the top 2. Though I don't think it's ever special or anything like that. I mean, I think it's like a C minus or a D plus. Um, maybe like a C minus in your red decks. It's acceptable, but it doesn't do anything too exciting, and it can be a little awkward. But sometimes it can be nice and just like kind of like nab you. It could be like a draw 2 with selection, while also like sometimes just not working out and hurting you a little bit more and being mana inefficient. I'm going to go with C minus for Mishra's Research Desk. All right, we have a Reconstructed Thopter. It is a 3 mana, 2/1 flying Thopter with Unearth 2. Okay, so 3 mana, 2/1 flyer is not embarrassing at all, and it's an artifact. So I think that this card is fine on that end. And then the Unearth is like pretty small. Like unearthing this for 2 isn't insane, but it's also like super cheap. This one's like the closest to being on rate on all its forms that like it's like below rate. Like a 3 mana 2/1 flyer isn't great, but it's also not embarrassing on top of like all the bonuses of being an artifact. And then the Unearth on it is cute while not like astounding. I also think this is like a C minus. This card's like not embarrassing to put in your deck at all. And it does like help with like it does help with aggression. I think you want to be aggressive to play it. It's definitely much more of an aggro card. But if you're an aggro deck that cares about artifacts, or has like a bunch of like mill graveyard synergies, like yeah, this is cute. Like yeah, C minus. Yeah, fairly uncomplicated card. I kind of like it. Or we have a Slagstone Refinery. It is a 4 mana artifact. Whenever Slagstone Refinery or another non-token artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield or is put into exile from the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. This looks like an F to me. 4 mana that does absolutely nothing. And then if some non-token artifacts, which a lot of your artifacts are going to be tokens, not all of them, but a lot of them, are go in the graveyard, you get to make some number of Power Stones. It double triggers on Unearth cards. You have to really want Power Stones for this to be an acceptable card, because it's a 4 mana do nothing until your creatures start dying, or not your creatures, but until your artifacts start dying. And then when they do start dying, they just make a couple of Power Stones. This looks like an F. It looks like it's too slow and does nothing and is too situational. But maybe if you really, really, really want Power Stones in your deck and you have a bunch of artifacts, this can sneak into playability. But I think overall this card just does not do enough for the cost that I believe to be an F. Spectrum Sentinel is a 1 mana 1/2 soldier, protection from multicolored. Whenever a non-basic land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you gain 1 life. This is a constructed plant. There's not enough there's not enough non-basic lands or multicolor spells that this does anything meaningful. If your opponent somehow like got a whole boat of multicolor spells, I guess you can sideboard it, but even then it's like bad. Like it only lines up against their multicolored spells. If they have a single 2/2, this no longer does anything. No, this card's an F, and it's for constructed. All right, Spotter Thopter is an 8 mana Thopter. It's a 4/5 with flying. When Spotter Thopter enters the battlefield, scry X where X is its power, and its prototype is a 4 mana 2/3. Okay, okay. So I don't think I want to cast this in my non-blue decks. It's close to Falaji Dragon Engine because it is a 4/5 flyer, not a 5/5 flyer. But I think the fire breathing on Falaji Dragon Engine made a big difference because Falaji Dragon Engine threatens to kill your opponent in like 2 attacks, whereas this does not. And so 8 mana for just the 4/5 flying, even though you get a big scry, is just not quite good enough. So I think I'd be casting this as a 4 mana 2/3 scry 2 a lot more that can tap out for a bigger creature later in the game. So I think it is primarily a blue card. And as a blue card, it's like a C. 4 mana 2/3 flying is a little weak, but you do get a double scry, which is nice. And then the fact that you get the ability to like tap out for a much bigger threat later on in the game, like it makes the value good enough. I probably wouldn't be too pumped about a 4 mana 2/3 scry 2, but it's perfectly acceptable. But then like having the full cast ability on it like pushes it up to playability. So it's like a C. I don't think it's like embarrassing, but I do think it's like a little on the small and weak side. Um, yeah, maybe even same C minus range. That's just a little small of a creature for what you're casting for it on both sides, even though the scry is nice. Steel Exemplar. Wow, that looks hardcore. It's a 5 mana 4/4 trample, a wizard. Steel Exemplar enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it, unless 2 or more colors of mana were spent to cast it. Interesting. So it's like a multicolor payoff. I'm sorry, a monocolor payoff. So if you're playing a monocolor deck, it's a 6 mana 5/5 trample, which is just good no matter what color you're. Or I'm sorry, a 5 mana 6/6 trample. Said that backwards. Which is a good rate for any color. I mean, that'd even be like a strong green card, as far as like creature size goes. Or it's just a 5 mana 4/4 trample if you're paying like multicolor. Actually, no, I think this card's good because of Power Stones, right? So if you have like 3 Power Stones, you can just like tap 3 of like, and you have like, even if you have 5 mana and it's split across 2 colors, if you have the Power Stones to make up the difference, this becomes a 6/6 trample. No, never. Actually, I think this card's good. I think this card's good. It's actually pretty big. I think it's like a C plus. It just I think you're actually going to be able. It's not just a monocolor payoff. I think that because there's the monocolor cards, themed cards in the set, those ones care about you having the types of lands that matter. And so I was like, this is like gonna go in those like monocolor type decks. But actually, no, it's not. The Power Stones make it so much different. I think it's just going to be a cheaper 6/6 trample. I think this card's good. I think this is like a C plus. Not quite a B minus because it's just kind of a big card. It's just kind of a big creature that like it requires you to have Power Stones. But honestly, once you have like a bunch of Power Stones in your deck, it kind of gets into B minus range. I mean, like if you're casting this for like 3 mana plus 2 Power Stones and it's a 6/6 trample, that's a sweet turn. That's a great card. So this card is really quite powerful. Just make sure you have Power Stones for it, and you'll be able to cast this for monocolor, and it's actually going to be really excellent. So yeah, good card. All right, we have Su-Chi Cave Guard. It is an 8 mana 8/8 construct with vigilance, ward 4, and when Su-Chi Cave Guard dies, add 8 colorless. Until end of turn, you don't lose mana and steps and phases end. Okay, so wow. 8 mana 8/8 vigilance is a big slammer. So like that is like really pretty good. It locks down the board on both offense and defense. Like it's really tough to deal with. And Ward 4 is gigantic, even if you can pay for that with Power Stones. Like that is a huge tax on your opponent. And then the ability is cute, but I don't think it's insane because at the point that you're casting your 8 mana spell, like, yeah, you can like you get a colorless back, but first of all, you can't control when that happens typically. And you might not have anything to do with the mana anyways. That said, it actually where it's probably at its best is when you like attack into into your opponent's board, and then they trade off with it, and then you get the 8 mana because then you can do more stuff with it on your turn. I think that this is like a C tier finisher. I think it's like a C tier finisher. It's like big and gigantic enough that like it's like a kind of a really big problem. and it's difficult enough to deal with both in combat on both sides of the table and with spells that it's actually really obnoxious once it's on the board. And then the mana ability is just cute and it doesn't really add up to too much, but it can be useful. This is also one of the best targets for reanimation because of the ward 4, kind of like what I was talking about, like with the other ward abilities, like the discard a card or pay life or whatever. Um, the mana abilities actually are like a lot more annoying. So if you get to like reanimate this card with like the white or black reanimate spell early on in the game, your opponent pretty much just can never beat it because they're not going to be able to like put 8 power together to like trade off with this thing in combat, and they're not going to be able to point a spell at it that can meaningfully kill it easily. So this is going to be one of the best reanimator targets so far that I've seen, because just by virtue of being like absolutely impossible to tangle with. So there is that to it too. And if you reanimate it, then it dies. Then the add a colorless means a lot more because you're a lot more likely to like have stuff in your hand that you can then unload. So yeah, if you're playing one of the reanimator decks, Suchi Cave Guard, big pickup. It's like a C tier finisher, but with interesting synergies. All right, we have Symmetry Matrix. It is a 4-mana artifact. Whenever a creature with power equal to its toughness enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. This looks like a A- in the right deck. This looks like a bomb because a lot of creatures have that, and you know what definitely has that? Soldier tokens. So, you know, you want to build around it a little bit. Like the more creatures you have that aren't necessarily soldier tokens, the better this gets. And I'd have to like look through the set and see like what percentage of the creatures actually hit this. But the fact that soldier tokens do, maybe it's more like a B plus because like you do have to spend 4, doesn't do anything, and then you have to get the specific creatures out and then pay mana. And if you do, you start drawing a card. But if you have a deck that like reliably makes soldier tokens, this just draws you a million cards. It is like really, really pretty good. So I'm gonna take it back. It's not A minus. I was a little excited, but it is like B plus level. It is like B plus level. And again, if you get there, if you like intentionally build around this, or you just have soldier tokens, like you're gonna draw a bunch of cards off of this card. So yeah, I think it's really, really, really quite good. It won't fit into like literally every deck. Like you might find that like as you're drafting this card and then you see this come around pack 3, it's not like one of those like B plus cards that it's like pack 3, oh, I can just pick this and slam it into my deck. Like you do have to work a little bit for it, and so it's not going to fit into every deck. But if you pick this early and are just cognizant of it, it's one of the best cards in your deck. It's really incredible. It's slow, so make sure you're not getting run over. But as long as your opponent isn't just like pressuring you to death, it's hard to imagine you losing a game where you like cast this and then follow it up with like any amount of creatures and draw the cards off of them. And then especially because it starts begetting itself. Also, you could trigger this multiple times a turn. Like if you have a spell that like the Mishra's whatever that makes like 2/1/1s, you can trigger this twice. Like you can trigger this like it's not even just like one additional card a turn. You can get like multiple cards off this in one turn if you have like the mana for it and you're casting the creatures. This thing can really go off. So it's a bit of a build around, but I really I can't stress enough. It's not that much of a build around. It's really going to be pretty easy to do this. All right, Thran Power Suit is a 2-mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to it and has ward 2 and equip 2. No, this is an F. This is an F. Uh, Even though there are auras and equipments, like so it gives +1/+1 on its own, and then if that same creature has another aura, this gives +2/+2. The ward's like cute and all, but it's not even that special. And then it's like a 2-mana. Like I think that this card is just an F. I think this card is just an F. This also looks like a constructed plant because I know there's an aura based constructed deck that I lost to. That would maybe like this card because it gives ward and a ton of stats, but I just don't see like you going like all in, like going you know, like Megatron on like one creature enough for this to like possibly be a thing. I don't want to put many of the other equipment in my deck. Some of the auras are good, but I think that this card's just an F. Uh-oh, creepy. Transmogrant Altar is a 3-mana artifact. Black and tap, sacrifice a creature, add 3 colorless. 2 and tap, sacrifice a creature, create a 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token, activate only as a sorcery. So, if you are playing a really heavy soldier token deck, this slowly upgrades all of your 1/1s into 3/3s. if you are not playing black at all. You can also upgrade other things into 3/3s, but that's like the primary use case to me that I see for this is like 2 mana tap, turn your 1/1 into a 3/3. Okay. Black and tap, sacrifice a creature, add 3 colorless. So I think if you were going off with soldier tokens, this can be a card. I really don't know how to rate this. It's really slow and costs an entire card. But if you have the time to do this and a bunch of soldier tokens, slowly upgrading each one of them into a 3/3 is a thing. And if you have soldier tokens or fodder creatures and big things to cast, ramping out things for an additional 3 colorless can be a thing. Like turning one of your creatures into like 3 colorless mana and like casting like one of the 9 mana spells can be reasonable. Can be reasonable. Overall, I think that this is a D. But there are going to be certain certain specific decks that have like lots of sacrifice fodder or want you to be sacrificing things and things to do with the colorless mana, or a bunch of soldier tokens and like you'll want to like slowly upgrade them over time, that this could sneak into those decks. I'm going to start this as like, honestly, I'm going to start this as like an F, but like there are going to be some decks that are capable of caring about one or both sides of this enough that it's not like this card does nothing. It's just that the upfront cost is really high and the build around cost is really high. So it's like an F, but certain specific decks, this actually does turn into like a weird finisher or help you cast your finisher, albeit at a steep cost. And it can move up to like a C- tier synergy card. So it's not this, it's like an F that you will play on occasion sometimes. I wouldn't be surprised if I go through the whole format and never play it, but there's probably times where it is right to play this card. Most of the time, no, though. All right, Yoshin Frontliner. 1 mana, 1/1 soldier. Okay. When Yoshin Frontliner attacks another target creature you control, gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and it has Unearth or a single white. This just seems too small to really be worth it. If you are really super aggressive, this is a reasonable aggro card, but 1 mana 1/1s are just really bad, even if they give you like a pump, and even if they have the Unearth, that I think that this card is an F. And if you are super, super aggro, like super aggro, white deck, because you definitely want to get the Unearth too, this could move to like a D+/C- tier aggro card. Like this is like it's the kind of card that it's like it's never going to be that good ever, but it will be like acceptable to play in your most aggressive of decks. But honestly, not even then, because it just trades off with the soldier token and it gives your like one of your creatures a Q +1/+1. This is going to be an F most of the time, and in a very specific deck, it might sneak into your deck as well. So yeah, I'm gonna rate this as like an F to start. All right, that is the uncommons. We just have the rares and the lands left. Can you believe it? Let's do it. Okay, here we go, team. We're almost done, I swear. We're getting there. We're closing in on the end. All right, let's do it. So we have Arcane Proxy. It is a 7-mana wizard, 4/3. When Arcane Proxy enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. And its prototype cost is 2 blue and 1 for a 2/1. So yeah, I think that this card it falls into the I only want it if I'm blue. The 7 mana 4/3 like copy of 4. Actually, I suppose that's pretty good. If I have really good spells to cast with that, I take that back. If I have really good spells to cast with that, that actually probably is good enough. Copying a spell for like 4 mana's worth of mana like really makes the 7 mana cost on this a lot less steep, and then leaving a 4/3 behind is like really pretty excellent. Though this card is way better if you're blue because I think that 7 mana is quite a bit. Now, it really is going to depend on you having targets, however, because the problem with the blue part of the cast is that like there's not a lot of spells that have 2 or less converted mana cost. I mean, obviously there's some, but like it's not like all of them have that. Like a lot are more expensive than that, obviously. So you really want to make sure that you're hitting that. So if you pick this early, keep that in mind. But yeah, actually, I take it back. It's probably an acceptable finisher in a lot of your other decks that can't actually cast it for its blue side. But unlike a lot of the other, like, especially like powerful rares and cards like this, you really do need to be hitting the spell side of this, because otherwise it's just like a super overcosted card. So all that being said, I think it's like a B plus. If you hit with this card, it's great. It doesn't like finish the game on its own, but it's like such a major value play that, like, with options on it, that I think it's really pretty solid. It's like a B plus. All right, up next, Artificer's Dragon. It's a 6 mana dragon, 4/4 flying, with red. Artifact creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Whoa! And then unearth, double red and 3. Hello. So I think that in the right deck, this card is really powerful. It's like, a 6 mana 4/4 flying is on the anemic side, um, for 6 mana, but not even that bad. And the ability on this is really good in the right deck. Like, if you have like a good number of artifact creatures, honestly, just the 6 mana flying 4/4, it's like a Shivan Dragon on its own. The 6 mana flying 4/4 with the pump ability. But the fact that it's pumping all of your artifact creatures means that, like, if you have a bunch of artifact creatures, like, your alpha strikes become insane. Like, you have a bunch of tokens. Like, if you have like, like 4 soldier tokens, you like cast this on the next card, you can pour all your red mana into it, and all of those tokens are like attacking for like 5 power on top of like whatever artifact creatures you have lying around. And this thing is like hitting in the air for 9 on that turn or whatever. Like this thing is like, if you were getting there with the artifact creatures, this thing is like an A- tier bomb. And it's gonna like, your opponent's gonna think that they're stabilized, and then you're gonna cast Artificer's Dragon, and then they're gonna realize that there's no possible way that they can survive your next attack unless they kill this thing immediately. Um, so I think that that is really, really good. And then it has Unearth too, which of course it's like pretty expensive. And it's I'm kind of glad that they put the double red cost on the Unearth, so it like really limits just how much you can go off with the fire breathing ability on it. But even then, it's like, okay, like double red and maybe like a couple power stones, and then it's like, if you have any red mana left over, like, this thing is still attacking for like 5 power flying haste and pumping all your other artifact creatures. This card seems really good. Obviously, it's only good if you're playing red. 6 mana 4/4 flyer. If you're not playing red, is just not where you want to be. Um, I suppose not embarrassing, but I wouldn't be excited about it at all. In your red decks, though, this is like an A- tier bomb. It's really good. Excuse me. All right, we have Autonomous Assembler. It is a 5 mana assembly worker, 4/5 vigilance. For with 1 and tap, put a +1/+1 counter on target assembly worker you control. And as prototype, white and 1, it's a 2/2. This is a good card. This is a really good card. So, right away, absolutely would cast this in my non-white decks. 5 mana 4/5 vigilance. That's just a solid card no matter what. With the ability, also solid, and it combines really well with the vigilance. Also, there's like not a million assembly workers, but like, it's a relevant creature type now. Like, there's a number of them, and the fact that you can like cast this early on as a 2 mana 2/2 vigilance that can also like continue to grow every turn is like really good. And the fact that you can like attack with it and then like activate it at instant speed. So like on like turn 3, it attacks as a 2/2, but can like tap and turn itself into a 3/3 on the turn that you're attacking with it as a vigilant creature is like really strong. I think this card is like super good. I think it's like a B plus. Um, and doesn't like steal the game or anything like that, but it's really obnoxious on like basically both sides of it, and the versatility is really good. And I'd be just fine with picking this card early, because even if I don't end up in white, I'm happy casting it on its non-white casting cost. So B plus, but its pick rate is going to be higher than that, because I'd be just really happy with this card in my deck all the time, even with no other assembly workers, by the way, just because of how it interacts with itself. Like, you do the same trick, um, with just itself, and you don't even have to do it like when it's dead. You can even get like, kind of like what I was talking about with Takasia. It's like it does triple duty, where it's like it attacks as a 4/5, blocks as a 4/5, and then you activate its ability on the end step after you've attacked and threatened to block with it, and now it's bigger, and now it's attacking as a 5/6 vigilance. Like, this thing is so annoying. All right, Blade Coil Serpent. It's a beautiful looking serpent, kind of spooky. I like it. 6 and X, interesting, for a 5/4 serpent. When Blade Coil Serpent enters the battlefield, for each double blue spent to cast a draw card, for each double black spent to cast it, each opponent discards a card. For each double red spent to cast it, it gets +1/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. Well, this thing slams, and really, it's not a Grixis card. It's like a 3-color card. Like, you can cast this in any. You wouldn't want to cast this in any of the decks that don't have one of these 3 colors. But if you are playing any one, basically, as long as you're not playing like green white, you know, this card fits into all the other decks, because if you cast this card just for 6, you don't even have to tap into the X, and activate any of these abilities even once, it has been worth it. 5/4 draw a card, 5/4 discard a card is probably the weakest. 6/4 trample haste, like all of these are acceptable rates on this card, and then it's even more than that. It's 6 mana, draw a card, 6/4 trample haste. That's insane. That's an insane card. So any combination of this that you can do is really excellent, and it's cool that they put the X there so you can like really just pour the mana into it if you want. I think that this card's like an A minus. Like it's really, really, really super good. As long as you're playing any one of the 3 cards, like you'll pick this early, and it's like it's gonna fit into like, again, as long as you're not just playing green white, like all of the abilities are great. On a not unacceptable rate, 6 mana 5/4 card. I think this is super good. Pick it and play it early. A minus. Cityscape Leveler. The size of this thing in the art is like so absurd. Like look how big that thing is. That's unreasonable. All right, it's an 8 mana 8/8 trample. Whenever you cast this spell, and whenever Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token, and then unearth 8. Okay, well this is a sick finisher. You put this as a finisher in any deck that you are considering, tapping out for something big at some point, right? Because it does exactly what you want a finisher to do. Not only is it big and gigantic and can attack your opponent to death, but it deals with the problems that your opponent is presenting on the other side of the table. It's really important for your expensive spells to like pull you back from being behind and like take back the board from you. Just being aggressive isn't good enough. So yeah, playing this and getting rid of the worst thing on the other side of the battlefield, even if your opponent gets a Power Stone, like take it, I don't care, is already good enough. Even if it didn't have any other abilities, like if it didn't have the attack clause on it, and if it didn't have Unearth, this would still be good enough to like just play and cast. And the fact that it's also whenever it attacks, so it just completely destroys your opponent's board position. Like you cast this thing, destroy something, attack with it, destroy something else, and then once you've destroyed 2 of their permanents, and they turn them into Power Stones, how do they ever block this thing? You've ruined their ability to do that by destroying 2 of their cards. You know what I mean? Like, and so like now you're just like facing it down, like you just can't get rid of it. You basically have to point a removal spell at it immediately, or you lose the game. And even when you do, it's like you lose your removal spell and they've destroyed like one of your permanents. And then unless it's exile, you get to unearth it and do it again. And when you unearth it, it destroys 2 more permanents. It's like because it comes into play and then attacks immediately as an 8/8 trample. This card's just an A. It's just an A, assuming that you can cast it. The only thing that keeps it from being like truly A tier is that it is an 8 mana spell, which I don't think is a problem. There's a lot of like worlds where like it's like 8 mana spell makes it like an F. Clearly this is not a set where this is one of them. I think 8 mana artifacts are going to be eminently castable. Maybe not easily castable, but like castable. You know what I mean? At the point that you can cast this card, it's an A. It's so good. All right, Clay Champion. 4 and X. So it's kind of the green-white version of this, the Serpent. It's a construct, 2/2. When Clay Champion enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it for each double green spent to cast it. And enters the battlefield, choose up to 2 other target creatures you control for each double white spent to cast Clay Champion. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of them. Okay, so again, you'll cast this in your green or white spell or white decks, because if you cast this as just a 4 mana spell, is like for like double white and 2, a 2/2, like say you cast the white version of it and you only get the trigger once. A 2/2 put 2 1/1 counters on 2 creatures is a perfectly fine spell. Like that's pretty good. A 4 mana 5/5 is a perfectly good spell. And then you can also get more than that the more you can get the colored mana. I think less so than the Serpent, because this card is a lot cheaper. With the Serpent, you're only going to have so much colored mana anyways. So I'm much more fine with like paying like, if I have to go like 2 Power Stones and then I only get like 1 trigger off of this because it's like I only have like 4 mana and it's like triple black and then 1 blue and then 2 Power Stones. I think that this is good enough. Whereas if I only get 1 trigger off of this, I think it's fine but not amazing. And so I'm way less excited about using any Power Stones at all to cast this thing, because again, like 4 mana 5/5 is pretty good. I think that that's the better side. And then 2 mana 2/2, put 2 1/1 counters on it. That's a decent card. It's not amazing. I think this is like a B plus. But if you get to do the whole thing, like if you get to cast it for like green, green, white, white, and it's like a 5/5, put two 1/1 counters on two creatures. I mean, we're moving into like, much higher territory here. And then of course it has the X clause on it, which again, I was like much less concerned about that with the Serpent because like at that point, like to truly get the X out of that creature, you're gonna have to go like and to make it worth it, like you're only gonna have so much colored mana, and so it's gonna really depend. You're gonna need to have like 8 sets of like paired colored mana to like even care about the X on that card, which is I didn't mention that. Let me actually go back and like talk about that real quick because yeah, like say you have like 6 mana and you have like 4 blue and 2 black and you have some power stones. Well, the X doesn't matter. Or say you have 3 and 3, the X doesn't matter. You really need to have like 8 sets of colored mana pairs. Or I'm sorry, 4 sets of colored mana pairs to like put the X into that. But when you do, that's insane. But it's going to be the minority of the time. Whereas this is like a little bit more reasonable to get there. Like if you have 6 mana and then you have like green, green, white, 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 yeah. I just want to make sure I understand that I'm reading the second. Okay, so it's only going to be 2 creatures, but you would be putting 2 +1/+1 counters on those 2 creatures. It's not like 4 creatures get 1/1 or whatever. It becomes a lot more reasonable. So this one, yeah, power stones don't really help at all. And you definitely want to be playing like again, either green or white. But if you cast this for like mono white, like two a 2/2 that puts 2 +1/+1 counters on 2 creatures, that's a really powerful spell. Or you cast this for mono green, it's like what, like a 4 mana 8/8, like that's pretty powerful. But the requirements are a lot higher on this card, so it's like a B plus. But like if you were like playing like green white or like a lot closer to like monocolor or whatever, then it moves into like A minus territory, especially like on the. So it's interesting. If you're only getting one activation, I like the green side a lot more because casting it as like a 4 mana 5/5 is like a lot better. But at the point that you're getting like multiple activations, I think like actually getting like the white part of it is a lot more important because it spreads it out. Because if you cast this as like a 4 mana 8/8, it could just bite it to a removal spell, and then it's like that looked good, but then it just dies and it just didn't do anything special. Whereas by spreading out the power, it leaves like a lot more of an impact. It can't just eat a removal spell and you lose everything. So, and I'm a lot less excited about this in my like, I don't know, like my green black deck or my like white blue deck or whatever. So I think the Serpent is better, even though like you shouldn't be comparing them. But overall, I think this is like a B plus or like an A minus, and it does the same thing. Like if you're playing a green or a white deck, this card has a place. So generally a B plus, but you can really like go into like super like bomb territory with it if you like really have the right colors of mana for it. All right, Liberator, Urza's Battle Thopter. It is a 3 mana legendary artifact creature Thopter. It is a 1/2 with flash and flying. You may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than the Liberator, Urza's Battle Thopter's power, put a +1/+1 counter on Liberator. This card's hard to rate. I don't really know. So a 3 mana 1/2 flash flying is super nothing special. Like it's really weak to start. Getting 1 counter on it turns it into a 3 mana 2/3, which is also not exciting. Getting 2 counters on it, now you've paid 3 mana for a 3/4. That's a little bit better. That's a little bit better. So, and then it can grow from there. The flash is okay. It's probably going to be a lot better in like your like blue decks or whatever, where it's like if you have like a bunch of counter magic and artifact spells, because it allows your like your artifact spells to play a lot better with your counter magic. But that's minor. I would say that like blue decks probably just off the top of my head. Really any deck with lots of instants, but that's more likely to be the blue decks. Is going to like this card a lot more. Whereas like some like this is like not much of an aggro card because it's like so anemic to start with. Like it's okay. I think that this is like a C plus. I don't think it does anything that exciting. I think that the flash is like acceptable, though fine. Though it does like do cute things with like triggering your artifact synergies and instant speed, kind of like how I talked about with like supply drop or whatever that card was. And assuming the sequencing goes right, this does like add a lot of like power eventually. Like you get it up to a 4 or 5, and it's like, okay, you're like crushing with it. I think it's like a C plus. It has sequencing issues. It's really pretty small to start. It adds like a very minor value ability with the flash, but if you put all the parts together, it's really reasonable. And like if you just get one counter on it, you've played a perfectly acceptable spell, you know. So it's not like it like hurts that bad. Being a 1/2 to start with is like a little small and sad, but it doesn't take much before this is like a perfectly acceptable card, and even just a little bit more, and then it's quite a good card. And your mileage may vary on the flash ability. All right, Perennial Behemoth is a 5 mana 2/7. You may play land cards from your graveyard. Unearth, double green. This is like, I don't know. So 5 mana 2/7 is like really weak. At a certain point, like extra toughness doesn't matter all that much. Like it's a 2/19. Okay, like whatever. Like it's, you know, it's a 2 power creature with enough toughness that it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it just like unlike power, toughness at a certain point stops mattering. And 7 is getting about to that point, even though there are really big creatures in the set. It's getting up to that point where it's like, okay, it might as well be a million. Like, okay, you're not going to kill it with damage. Got it. Check. But and at that point, like the stats just aren't great. It's like a decent defensive body. It's kind of cute with like the mill. So where this card is good is you're playing a deck with mill and expensive things that you're going to want to cast eventually. And what this does is it locks down the board and then allows you to get the land cards out of your graveyard so that you can eventually cast your expensive spells. That is what the play pattern of this card is supposed to be. I think Unearth looks really wacky on this card. I don't really get it. Because yeah, you play double green, you get a 2/7 haste, and you get to play a land out of your graveyard. I guess the reason that the Unearth is stapled onto there is because, like I said, this is already intended to be played with the mill, and so like this also can get milled in that same deck, which gives you like a little bit of an extra like, nice. In a very specific deck, it's like a C, where you're doing all of those things. You're milling, you want to like play additional lands past a certain point, and you want what is basically just an adequate blocker. If you don't have expensive stuff to cast, if you're not milling, you can ignore this card, you know. It just doesn't do anything that amazing. But yeah, it's like a C in the deck that's doing the things that this is doing, and then otherwise you just don't need it. All right, Phyrexian Dragon Engine, here we go. Man, the art on this card is so hardcore. So it is a 3 mana Phyrexian Dragon, a double strike 2/2. When Phyrexian Dragon Engine enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards, and it has Unearth for double red and 3. So right away, so this is acceptable in your non-red decks. 3 mana 2/2 double strike, acceptable card. Not exciting, acceptable. So right there, that is fine. Phyrexian Dragon, so the ability is actually really super good too. Draw 3 is a lot off of something like that, especially at the point that you're like unearthing that. Usually you're going to be, play pattern wise, typically you're going to be unearthing when you don't have other stuff to do with your mana, because unearth isn't like an insane ability. It's like you do that, like it gives you like a little bit of extra gas when you've already like spent all of your other gas, because it generally is not like a very powerful play for the mana. So you're going to want to use that as like the last stuff that you spend your mana on anyways. So the play pattern of this card is actually kind of nice. If you're playing in a red deck, this is like a B. It's like a B, maybe even a B plus, because the 3 mana 2/2 double strike, powerful, adequate card. The Unearth is like, you know, it becomes like a 2/2 haste double strike, which can be kind of annoying. But then like refilling your hand with like a bunch of gas after that point is actually like really pretty powerful. So you could pick it, and it's like a C in your like non-red decks, and then it's like a B in your red decks, where like it actually like gives you like a whole bunch of gas later on in the game, both as an attacker and as refilling your hand. It's kind of nice. And it's like an A plus if you have Mishra. So Phyrexian Fleshgorger. It's a 7 mana 7/5 Phyrexian Worm with Menace and Lifelink. And ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian Fleshgorger's power. And then you can cast it for its prototype as a double black 3/3. Wow, okay. So first of all, I do think that this is an acceptable card in your non-black decks. I've talked about how like you want your finishers, your expensive finishers, to be good defensively. Even though this has Menace on it, it also has Lifelink on it. And so like just playing this as like a 7 mana 7/5 that if your opponent attacks into you, you gain 7. It really stonewalls any kind of an offense. So and a 7 mana 7/5 Menace lifelink is a solid rate. Like, that is perfectly fine. And the ward might be just simply unpayable by your opponent. Like, that is so much life that really hurts, especially if you like can threaten to like attack back. There's just a lot of situations where like they just can't do anything about it. So acceptable in your non-black decks. And then the prototype makes this like incredible because a 3 mana 3/3 light Menace lifelink, it's like, how do you ever erase that? That's so annoying. That's really incredible. And then having the obviously the option to do both is really good. So in your black decks, this is like, I don't think it's quite a bomb. I think it is like a B plus though. If you can reliably, like if you have like good ways to like pay the 7 mana side of it on top of the black side, I guess it gets into like A minus territory. Like it's like super strong. It's really annoying. And the versatility kind of like pushes it there. So it's another one of those cards that's like right on the line where it like doesn't just like win the game for you bomb style, but it's like way above rate, so above rate that it's really nice on top of flexibility. And then again, in your like non black decks, it's like a B or B minus level finisher card that I'd be perfectly happy to play. So I would definitely like probably first pick this card, try to play black, and then if I don't, I have this really nice finisher in my deck. Platoon Dispenser is a 5 mana construct, 4/6. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, draw a card, and then it has for a white and 3, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token, and then it has unearth for double white and 2. So right away, yep, play this card in your non-white decks. It's a 5 mana 4/6 that draws you cards. At the beginning of your end step, you draw 2 or more other creatures. So all you need is like 2 more creatures, and this will draw you a card every turn. And it does so immediately at the beginning of your end step, and it's really reasonably statted as a 5 mana 4/6. And then if you're playing white, you get to just churn out soldiers, and it has unearth, so you can like, you're probably not going to get, unless you have a bunch of mana, it's like what, like triple white and 5, you can like, unearth this, make a 1/1, and then get the end step draw card. But yeah, even this is a level bomb, even if you were not playing white. If you were playing white, it's like an A plus. Like, it's absurd. It's really silly. It's like one of the best rares you can open, and if you're playing white. And then again, like you'll just pick this every time because it's going to fit in like every single color deck. Like, there's a couple cards now. I was thinking about this about the 3/1 soldier that makes a 1/1 white card. Like, there's a couple of white cards that like I'm sure the white players are going to get annoyed about because other players are going to be picking them, and you're not going to get, even though it's like it's a card in your color, like you're just not going to get it. This definitely fits into that category. This is one of the best rares in the set. It's absurd. Gigantic, great stats, creates a board all on its own, draws you a bunch of cards, even comes back for more for a little bit if you need it. This is like an A plus. This card's incredible. Very annoying. Super annoying. All right, Portal to Phyrexia is a 9 mana spell artifact. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It is a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. If you can cast this, this is a hell of a finisher. It's a lot. It's a lot of mana. You got to get there. But sacrificing 3 creatures, even with soldier tokens kind of blunt the sacrifice ability on this. But even then, like if they have to sacrifice 3 soldier tokens, that's still a huge chunk of their board state, and that's not always going to be the case, right? So it does what you want a finisher to do. Immediately eats their board state some. Doesn't block or anything, but it eats a bunch of the board state. And then every turn, it has like more inevitability than pretty much every other card in the set. Like, it just every single turn, you get to return a creature from a graveyard every turn for the rest of the game. Yeah, this is like, if you can cast this thing, it's like an A, but you have to be able to get there. Your deck has to be able to get there, which is going to be like a more defensive controlling deck, probably with Power Stones. Also gets like, huge points for me for just like having like really sick art. And I'm just a sucker for anything Phyrexia, and the art for this like just really captures like kind of like the horror of like what Phyrexia is like to me. I'm just really about it. I really like this card. So yeah, I want to call it like an A if you can cast it, but because it's a 9 mana spell, this is where letter grades kind of start to fall apart, right? Because like, yeah, in effect it's like an A, but are you going to get there? That remains to be seen. So it might, like, if you can never cast it, it's like an F, right? So just make sure you can cast the card. And the problem with this as a finisher, unlike a lot of the other finishers that have like prototype or whatever, is it really can't be overstated how important prototype is to making your because the problem with big expensive finishers is they are expensive and you can never cast them. And so it can't be overstated how valuable the versatility of being able to cast them as a cheap side goes. Whereas so like it's very likely that you're going to have the option to have other finishes in your deck that won't get stuck in your hand because they are only an expensive card. Whereas this has the big downside of only being a 9 mana spell. It's super sick though. So if you can cast it, it does do enough. All right, Razor Lash Transmogrant is a 2 mana 3/1 that can't block. I'm not thrilled about that. For double black and 4, return Razor Lash Transmogrant from your graveyard to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability costs 4 mana less to activate if an opponent controls 4 or more non-basic lands. I think that this is an F. I think that this is an F. A 2 mana 3/1 can't block is not an acceptable card. I definitely wouldn't play it in my non-black decks. That's not a card. And then double black and 4, it's always going to be double black and 4 because your opponent is not going to have 4 or more non-basic lands in this set. So it's going to cost 6 mana, even your black decks. And then it's like a 2/1 that can't block, and for 6 mana you can cast a 4/2 that can't block. This is an F. I don't like it. This is a constructed card. All right, here we have Rootwire Amalgam. It's a 5 mana 5/5. With 2 green and 3, sacrifice Rootwire Amalgam, create an XX colorless golem artifact creature token where X is 3 times Rootwire Amalgam's power. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This card's absurd. So first of all, 5 mana 5/5, you can just stick that in your deck even if it's not green. So you can like first pick this card fearlessly. And then even if you don't end up playing green, you can cast it. As a green spell, this card's absurd. This card is absurd. So well, I say absurd. It's actually a little bit less than that because it's only as a sorcery. So the 2 mana 2/3 side, 2 mana 2/3, reasonable stats, and then you can upgrade it later in the game, and it makes like it turns into a 6/6 golem. If you go from the prototype side to the ability golem side, so it starts off as a 2/3, really nice stats on your second turn, and then upgrades into a 6/6. Sick, great, love it. And then you can also play it as a 5/5. And then it turns into a 15/15 with haste. That's crazy. Now, of course, like there's like a bunch of like problems. Like I mean, not like problems, but like it doesn't have trample or anything, so you can just like chump it. And like maybe like that's not like card advantage by any means. So like it just like upgrades itself in size, and so like it's still like vulnerable to removal and all that. But the combination like like if you're playing green, this is like a B plus. Maybe an A- because you can get this thing going so early in the game as a 15/15. Again, it could just eat a removal spell. That's why I'm a little hesitant to give it like bomb status because like ultimately it is just a dude that is big that doesn't provide value, and big dudes, while good, there's a lot of counters to just a creature that is simply big, right? So that's why it's not like a bomb. It's not like a platoon dispenser where it like draws you a million cards and like creates a board beyond it of its own, and then like even if it dies, it has like more ways to like get back and get the value back. What I will say is this plays really well with like certain graveyard cards because it puts itself in the graveyard while leaving a creature behind, and then if you like buy this back again, like maybe you can make multiple 15/15s in a game, and that's pretty good. So it's pretty mana intensive. I think this is like a B plus. And maybe your opponent doesn't have a removal spell that can deal with the golem that it makes, in which case you get to slam the 15/15 at them for forever. Maybe and give it trample. Maybe you put audacity on it and then they just die. But because it doesn't like come with like any like value, it's limited in that regard. Maybe it's like close to an A-, but I would like to see like if it had anything other than just being big at a relatively steep mana cost. I say steep because like going 5 and then paying 5 more for it is like a big mana investment. Same with like the prototype version of it where it's like you play 2 and then on your 5th turn you spend 5 mana and all you do is you upgrade your 2/3 into a 6/6, That's like a decent amount of mana for what is ultimately just like a 6/6. It's a lot, like 5 and then 5 is like a solid amount of mana for, I mean, a 15/15 obviously, but that could just die. It can be really mana negative. You pay 5 again, and your opponent's like disenchant. you know, they eat like 2 of your turns and you never even got to attack with a 15/15. That's where I'm coming from here. But it's really good. I was looking. I know we just talked all about the downsides. The card's really good. All right, Simian Simulacrum. I like the naming on this. I mean, that's pretty good. It's a 3-mana 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature you control, and it has Unearth for double green and 2. Wow, dang. So first of all, yes, I will play this on my non-green decks. It's just a 3-mana 4/3. Or you can put it on another creature, like you put it on a flyer or something like that, and that's an incredible amount of stats. So this is a really good rare. And I mentioned this in the previous set review, but there is absolutely something to be said for your powerful rares being cheap as opposed to expensive, because you're basically never going to have a game where you don't hit 3 mana. I mean, it happens sometimes, obviously, but where you don't hit 3 mana to cast this spell. And so having your super powerful cards on the cheap end of the spectrum as opposed to the expensive end of the spectrum is majorly different, because there are going to be plenty of games where you don't get to 9 mana to cast Portal of Hyrexia. There's basically never going to be a game where you don't get to cast this card. So when your powerful cards are always castable, it's a world of difference, right? So I rate these like way higher than like some of the big finishers. Also, you only need so many big finishers in your deck. So like, yeah, you could have like Portal of Phyrexia, but you could have like a couple of other cards and it's like relatively comparable, and you really don't need too many of the you don't need to fill that slot too much. Whereas it's like you can have too many 3/3s, but the number of 3/3s I'm sorry, three drop creatures, but the number of 3-drop creatures you need before you have too many 3-drops is like way higher, right? So I tend to rate these powerful rares on the cheap end way higher because I think they're better. And this one gets there. I will absolutely play this in my non-green decks. It's a 3-mana 4/3 or a 3-mana 2/1, put 2/1/1s on something. And then the Unearth makes it like way better. You get to do it twice. So if you're playing in your green decks, it's like way better. I think this card is like a B in your non-green decks, and it's like a B or maybe like a B minus, I don't know. And then it's like a B plus in your green decks. Maybe not quite A minus territory, but like getting to cast this and then unearth it, it like makes like, you know, it's 2 creatures and then like it puts 2+1/+1 counters on stuff twice. Like it just adds so much board presence for so little investment, that this card's really excellent. It's like it's going to be like one of your better rares in your green decks. Like it's going to smash your opponents to death. It's really strong. All right, Skitterbee Battalion is a 9-mana 4/4 trample haste construct. When Skitterbee Battalion enters the battlefield, if you cast it, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. Okay, all right, I see. So it actually puts like 12 haste power on the battlefield. And then it has prototype for 2 red and 3, and it is a 2/2, so it creates like 3 2/2s with trample and haste. This card is okay. This card is pretty good, but like, so the prototype side, like 3 2/2 hastes is really good, but it's a lot easier for that to just like not go your way. And if your opponent has like, if you don't have much of a board and your opponent has like 2 2/3s, like it doesn't actually do anything, right? Like it's like, that's actually kind of bad. If you're already like applying a lot of pressure and then you like cast this, like obviously it can close the game out. And also like just paying 2 red for 3 2/2s, even if you don't attack with them, or I'm sorry, yeah, double red and 3 for 3 2/2s, even if you don't attack with them, is really good. So it should be noted that actually defensively it's also quite good, even if you can't attack with the haste. And then it is a solid finisher, like 12 haste power for 9 mana. Again, it gets awkward if your opponent has like good blockers for it. And the fact that it's like so spread out, but even then, again, really solid. And it's like, that's an incredible defensive play too. Like, again, it does what you want your 9-mana finisher to do, is like, if you pick 3 4/4s for 9, it's really hard for you to be like under enough pressure that you're dying still, you know? So I would rate this as like, I think you not definitely want to be red, but highly encourage you to be red to play this card. You can cast it as your finisher if it's not. I think it is like a B plus in your red decks. Maybe I'm underrating it a little bit. Maybe it's closer to an A minus. But and then in your non-red decks, it's like a B tier finisher. I think you want to be red though, because as good as like the 9-mana side is, I just think that it's not quite good enough. Like, it's not like gigantic enough that it's kind of the same situation. If your opponent is like beating your board already, you might not be able to profitably attack with the 3/4/4s. Maybe I'm really underselling it though. It's tough to evaluate. I think the hard time I'm having evaluating this one is it's really board contextual. If you're already applying pressure and then you cast this card on either side, your opponent probably dies. Like if your opponent like already is like struggling to defend your attacks and you put this much haste power on the battlefield across multiple bodies, they probably die. If you are under attack, it does do a good job defending you. If the board is like closer to parity and your opponent has creatures of an appropriate size that they like actually like can like block profitably, this card becomes a lot weaker. So your mileage may vary. I'm pretty uncertain on the rating on this card. If you're playing red, jam this and play it, and you'll probably smash people with it. But I think it's going to ultimately play closer to a B plus than like an A tier card. All right, Steel Seraph is a 6-mana angel, 5/4 with flying. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, or lifelink until end of turn. Wow, and then it has a prototype, double white, and 1 for a 3/3. Well, yep, I'm going to play this one even if I'm not white. 6-mana, 5/4 flying, and on combat, so I cast it in my pre-combat main, and it immediately gives it a creature flying or lifelink or something. Like, yeah, that's incredible. That's so good. Excellent finisher. And then even as like the white card, like a white 3/3 flyer that's going to do the same thing, like that's so good. So this is like an A minus maybe, um, especially if you're playing white. But I will absolutely play this on my non-white deck, because yeah, allowing something to go to the skies immediately or getting a big lifelink attack in, um, it's huge game. It's huge game. And then the versatility of casting it is just like a 3/3 to do the same thing is also really excellent. So yeah, it's probably like a B plus. In your non-white decks, and then it's like an A minus in your white deck. It's really, really solid. All right, we have Surge Engine is a 2-mana construct defender, 3/2. Okay, but for a blue, Surge Engine loses defender and gains this creature can't be blocked. Oh, a blue and 2, Surge Engine becomes blue and has base power and toughness 5/4. Only activate if Surge Toughness doesn't have or Surge Toughness. Surge Engine doesn't have defender. And then 2 blue and 4, draw 3 cards, activate only if Surge Engine is blue and only once. Oh, okay, so this card's a bomb. If you're playing blue, it's like, I mean, it's a blue bomb, but, so yeah, even just like paying it for 2 and then paying the blue on it, like a 3/2 unblockable, like, good luck. Like, so you basically have to kill it. Like, it's going to be like impossible to race. And then the fact that you can then turn it into a 5/4 unblockable for just 3 more mana, like that's absurd. And then it can draw 3. Now you're going a little all in, like you're paying a bunch of mana to like go all in on this one creature. So if your opponent has like a removal spell for it and you've dumped a bunch of mana into it, it's like you pay 2, you pay blue, then you play another blue and 2, and they like disenchant. They get a huge mana play on you, but whatever. Like if they don't just like immediately remove it, like this card just runs away with the game. Again, even if you just pay it for the 2 mana and then pay a single blue, that's already an incredible creature. And the fact that you can make it gigantic when you need to, and then you can also like draw 3 cards off of it like later on. This looks like an A minus in your blue decks to me. Like just the versatility of just being like an impossible to block 3/2 that also like threatens to like super smash your opponents and then draw a bunch of cards. I think this is an incredible blue card. I don't like a 2-mana 3/2 defender in my non-blue decks, but this is just a blue card that looks like A minus tier to me. It's like so good. It's so annoying. All right, Teresian Mindbreaker is a 7-mana 6/4. When Teresian Mindbreaker attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded up, and then it has Unearth for triple blue and 1. I don't like this card. So you can mill people with it, and what's kind of cute is that like other people are going to be like self-milling a little bit, so like you can like almost punish them a little bit because they're already going to have like milled a bunch of their deck, and then like so the amount of cards that they have remaining is like going to start to get like way lower, and they're going to be in danger. There's a bunch of things I don't like about it though. First of all, it's a 7-mana 6/4. That's too expensive for a 6/4. I don't like that. It has to attack, so you then have to like untap and attack with it. And sure, it like mills them a bunch, but then like it also just trades off, like because of 4 toughness, like they can just like kill it really easily. And so like 1 attack, yeah, mills half their library. Okay, like that is a lot. But as far as like winning via the non-mill game plan, it doesn't help you defend, and it also is like not a great attacker for like how much you're paying for it. You're basically going not all in on the mill plan, but that is the only way that this card helps you win the game because it's such a poor attacker for a 7-mana spell. Does that make sense? And then the Unearth is triple blue, so you got to be playing heavy blue. And again, you get to mill them again. That is annoying, but it might even still only be the first mill. Like, because if you play this and then they use a removal spell on it, and then you get to use this ability, yeah, you still got to mill them a bunch, but like, it's only half their library, so it's not like it's like mill 10, where like if they only have like 15 cards in their deck, it's like 2/3 of their library. If they have 20 cards left in their deck, you get to mill them 10, but then they still have 10 cards in their deck, like and that's at the point that they have 20 cards in their deck, you know what I mean? Like it's I just think that this won't get there on the mill ability enough, even though it like every now and then it'll be like, yeah, you mill them, like you attack and then they can't deal with it, so you get multiple attacks and then they mill down to like nothing, or you get to let you attack and then they kill it and they like trade off and then you get to unearth and then it like gets them low enough where they actually can't win the game by the time that they mill. But I just think it's so poor stats wise for what you're getting, and you're just like risking it on trying to get there with the mill, which is like so uncertain. Also, there's a number of cards that like put cards back on the bottom of people's libraries that you can start doing that to yourself. Also, there's a lot of cards that like want, like there's a lot of people self-milling, and so you're also like setting up their own synergies. Like all of that put together just doesn't seem that great. Like I just don't think this card's good enough, even though it could potentially just kill your opponent via mill. I think it's super risky to try to do it, both in that like you're overpaying for this and it might just not work and you might set up their synergies, and you definitely don't want it if you're not playing blue. I don't know, this looks like an F to me. I just don't think it'll get there, though maybe it's closer to like a D because like you can try it and it does add a different angle of attack to your deck. Maybe I'm underrating it a little bit. I just think it's a little too risky to like go in for something so poorly costed. All right, we got Terror Ballista. Is a 7-mana 5/3 with Menace. Whenever Terror Ballista attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Okay, all right. And then it has Unearth, double black, and 3. So a 7-mana 5/3 Menace is definitely overcosted. But you can sacrifice creatures and start like killing your opponent's creatures, which also makes it like a lot harder to effectively block a 5/3 Menace. But at the point that you're casting this, like it's a 7-mana card, I just don't see your opponent not being able to like profitably block this thing, even though you do get the sack kill ability. The Unearth is cute. Like that does this is one of the best unearths I've seen, where like when you unearth this, it both like adds like a really nasty attacker in the form of a 5/3 Menace and allows you to kill one of your opponent's creatures. So both in like the size of the attacker that you're creating and the effect that it has on the game, it's kind of at its best on an unearth. I almost want to just like mill this card and then unearth it to cast it once, and then it's kind of like a weird removal spell that also like a weird bone splinters that also gets a big attack in. Because the 7-mana side, it's like so weak with the 3 toughness that I'm not crazy about that. But I tell you what, you mill this card, and I really haven't actually been like evaluating a lot of the unearth cards with the mill in mind, and so maybe if you go back and like watch this or like think about this, like I guess I haven't really been thinking about the self mill too much when it comes to these unearth cards, and like evaluating them as like, what if you just mill this? But also a lot of them just haven't like been like insane in that regard anyways. This one is one of the better ones to do that with, and I think that that's kind of where you want to play it, because I'm really unexcited about the 7-mana side of it. It looks like a C plus tier finisher to me, um, because it's definitely overcosted for like what the creature side they're getting out of it, but it does get you out from under some problems when you start attacking with it. So I think it fits in about there. And we still got a bunch. All right, the Mightstone and Weakstone. It's 5 mana. When the Mightstone and Weakstone enters the battlefield, choose one. Draw 2 cards, or target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn, and then it has like a double Power Stone ability. 2 can't be spent to cast non-armor effects, and then it melds with Urza. Um, I like this card. I think there's enough versatility on this that it actually like really adds a lot. Either one of the options is going to be really good. Either draw 2 or a removal spell. Are both a little overcosted, but the versatility stapled together is like really nice. And then the double Power Stone effect is going to like help you also like use your abilities, and like it like leaves it's like kind of, if it didn't even have the Power Stone effect, it's kind of close enough on like just the versatility of the removal spell or the draw 2 that it would be good. And the fact that it also like leaves the double Power Stone behind once you do that is like this nice little added value. I think that this is like a C plus. It doesn't do anything that insane, but it basically has like 3 solid abilities on it that I don't feel like I'm super overpaying for any of it. That I actually kind of like having this card. I think it'd be a reasonable card to pick early because it'll just kind of it's playable in basically every situation, and it's kind of a nice smoothing card for a not unreasonable cost, and it's colorless, so I like it. Might even get into like B minus territory. The Stasis Coffin is a legendary artifact for 3. 2, and tap, exile the Stasis Coffin. You gain protection from everything until your next turn. Now, this looks like an F to me. Unless you can, like, maybe you can do some goofy combo where you keep rebuying this thing, but it's like a terrible fog. It's like a terrible fog. And the only things that, like, it's not going to, like, fog you from is, um, like Gix's Caress or something like that. Like, haha, you can't make me discard a card. I did it myself by playing the Stasis Coffin. No, this is just an F. I don't like this card at all. The Stone Brain. What is this thing? It's a legendary artifact. Apparently I should know what it is. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact. 2 and tap, exile the Stone Brain. Choose a card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so this is an F. This is an easy F, unless you're playing like a best of 3 sideboard game, and then your opponent has some super sick bomb that you absolutely can't beat in any other way, and even then it's bad. So I'm going to say it's an F, with the big caveat of like maybe they have like something incredible, or like I don't know, maybe they're like some sort of sick combo deck and they have multiple cards of their combo copies of their combo card. But I'm like talking about like the most niche case here ever. This is an F. All right, Thran Spider is a 3-mana 2/4 reach. All right, I'm in. When Thran Spider enters the battlefield, you and target opponent each create a tap Power Stone token. Okay, that's not the symmetrical is not my favorite, but fine. But then it has 7. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You'll reveal an artifact card from among them, put in your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. Oh, okay, all right. This card's like a B plus maybe. So 3-mana 2/4 reach, really excellent body, especially on an artifact creature. The symmetrical Power Stone token is kind of annoying because they get first crack at their Power Stone, but like maybe they don't even have as much to do with Power Stones as you do. And the fact that this comes with an ability that makes you want to use a Power Stone, like that's not even like the worst thing in the world is giving you both a Power Stone token. Like okay, whatever. Like there's some symmetrical effects that are like really bad. That one, it doesn't hurt that bad. And then this ability is also really solid. Like, yeah, look at the top 4, you get an artifact card. So like, not only is it just like a really super solid defensive body, but then it has an ability that can like take over the game by like drawing you a bunch of cards. This looks like, and it's colorless, so you can pick it. Like, this is like an incredible first pick card. Um, I don't think it's like bomb level, but it's really strong. I think it's like a B plus. I think this is a really excellent card. All right, guys, we're getting to the end. We're almost there. All right, Transmogrant's Crown. It's an equipment for 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw a card. Equip 2 or black. Okay, this is an equipment I can get behind. Okay, because it gives power, right? So like each one of your creatures can now start trading up with like additional power, right? So I really like that. And then stapling the draw card on there is like really good because now not only am I like able to like continuously trade my creatures up, but then I will eventually grind my opponent out with this card. And then the thing I really like about it is, especially in your black decks, I think it's acceptable in a non-black deck. The equip 2 is a lot worse than equip black. Like obviously it's double the cost. It really hurts on equipment, let me tell you. But I think that like honestly that even that's fine. Like you could play this in your non-black decks, but the black is like I'm really nice if you can get that. But yeah, being able to like continuously like gain value by like trading creatures off and then getting cards back for them is so good. Especially like if you play this like in a sacrifice themed deck where you can like start equipping this for like a single black and then sacrificing a creature, and then so it's like you get to like draw a card based on your sacrifice just from that, and it's really not that expensive. I think that this is a really solid card. I think this is like a B level equipment. You kind of want to be doing a couple different things to make it worth it, but I might even be underrating it a little bit. Putting draw a card on a card like this is like way different than it is like the like flying artifact equipment or whatever. I think that that's pretty weak. Whereas like +2/+0 is a good power pump. And again, what really draws me to this is that the equip is cheap enough, especially if you're black, that you're going to be able to do this like multiple times. And this one card not only like it really increases the power on your board, but it can also like fill your hand with gas. I think that as far as equipment goes, this is the level that equipment needs to be at for me to be happy about playing it. I think it's quite good. All right, Urza's Silex is a 3-mana artifact, and it has a white activation cost 2 and 2 white. Exile Urza's Silex. Each player chooses 6 lands they control, destroy all other permanents, activate only as a sorcery. And when Urza's Silex is put into exile from battlefield, you may pay 2. If you do search your library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it and put it in your hand and shuffle. So that's flavor text. But this is like a slow Wrath. And so it's a white spell. You only want this in your white decks. And it's like a slow Wrath, but a good one. Yeah, I would play this. Like, obviously, Wraths, the same caveats the Wraths always get, you know. Sometimes you are not in a position where you want a Wrath, and it can be really awkward. But it puts your opponent in an awkward spot, too. I think what most Wraths play is like a B+ level card, you know. It's not like a bomb, but like they get you out of situations that no other cards can. It's expensive and a little slow, but yeah, I think it's fine, especially like if you're the one who knows it's coming, like you can play around it a little bit more. So yeah, if you're playing white, this is just like a really nice Wrath. And the fact that it destroys all other permanents is really kind of nice, because it's going to destroy like obnoxious enchantments, all your opponent's power stones and things like that. I think it's like a B+. All right, last card in the artifacts. I just remember we have lands, but luckily there's only a couple. Woodcaller Automaton with 10 mana, 8/8 construct. When Woodcaller Automaton enters the battlefield, if you cast it, untap target land you control. It becomes a treefolk creature with haste and base power and toughness equal to Woodcaller Automaton's power and toughness. It is still a land. So actually this makes 2 8/8s, and one of them is like hasty. That's really good. And then it has prototype 2 green and 2, and it's a 3/3. So weirdly enough, so this is one that I think it's like really pretty good as a finisher. Okay. I actually like it a lot less as the prototype size, because making 2 3/3s, but one of your lands becomes a 3/3, that is a lot of stats on the board, but putting one of your lands at risk for that is like really risky at that stage of the game. Whereas later on, once you cast this for 10, it's like, whatever, kill my land, I don't care. And the land has a lot more impact. So I'm actually a lot more inclined to like try to cast this for the 10/10 size, where I make 2 8/8s, rather than the prototype size. That said, the versatility is nice. I don't know. I worry about getting your lands killed and tying up your mana on the green cast side of it. I think that this is like a B. As a 10 mana, make 2 8/8s, like that's pretty good. Like that's a solid finisher, but that's 10 mana. That's so much. And then the 4 mana 3/3 and to make a land a 3/3. It's 6 power and toughness for, 4 mana, but you're risking a land. It's like a B. I think it's like a B. You could do that. Just be really cautious and make sure that like getting that land killed isn't going to like screw you more than it helps you, and I think that would be fine. Yeah. Okay, cool. That is the artifacts, just the lands, and then we are done. Okay, the lands. This should hopefully be quick. So first we have Argoth Sanctum of Nature. It's a land. When Argoth Sanctum of Nature enters the battlefield tapped, unless you control a legendary green creature, which will be the minority of the time, I'm sure. Tap, add green, and then 2 green and 2, tap, create a 2/2 green bear creature token, then mill 3 cards, activate only as a sorcery. So this is really good. So it's funny, when I first evaluated this card, I thought it was going to be like a top pick rare, because and I'm sure a lot of you folks already know this, but lands rate way higher than they look, simply because when you draft a land, it like adds so much power into your deck that doesn't take up one of your spell slots. You get to upgrade like a basic land slot for something useful, as opposed to like, any spell that you put in your deck like is only as much better as whatever spell that you cut for it, right? I probably worded that really funny because I'm tired. I've been doing this for 100 years, but you follow what I mean. Whereas like lands, like they're going to upgrade a basic land. That's a huge upgrade, right? So Argoth is a big upgrade. If you get to make a couple of bears off of this, like having your forest like make like 2 2/2s is big game. Like that really adds a lot to your board when this card like first like helps you cast a bunch of spells, and then when you're out of stuff to do with your mana, then you can like create additional like board presence with it. That's so good. Now I then like retracted that a little bit because there's a mill 3 on it, which does limit how many times you can do this. Like you can't do this like, 8 times or whatever, because you'll just mill yourself out. But then that was before I also realized that there was like so much mill in the set that actually it's like kind of back to like that being a value add. It's a limiting factor on how many bears you can make, but it also like sets up your synergies. So I think that this is like the top of a card. I think this is like a B+. Simply because like even if you end up like a lot of games where you don't activate it, the fact that you're sneaking this ability to make like additional token creatures into your mana base and set up your mill strategy into your mana base, I just think that like this is like a really high value card for your green decks and a good place to start. Okay, we got Battlefield Forge. All of these are like play them if you are in the color pair or if you're really interested in splashing. But I don't know how much of that you're going to do in this set. And if not, like whatever, don't worry about it. The pain doesn't hurt too bad. It's better to have better mana. So I'll just skip past those. Okay, Blast Zone enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it. Tap to add colorless. On double X and tap, put X charge counters on Blast Zone. And then 3 and tap, sacrifice Blast Zone to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of charge counters on Blast Zone. This is a good card. This is a good card. I mean, it's really pretty mana intensive and slow. But again, like putting like a Wrath into your mana base, like what in the world? Like that's so good. And it starts with 1 charge counter on it. So each equal to the number of charge counters. So actually, it's not a Wrath. I have to go back on that. It's more of a Ratchet Bomb that starts at 1. Wait, does Ratchet Bomb destroy all that are less? I can't really remember how Ratchet Bomb works. Whatever. That's not how this card works. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of charge counters. So it can be very specific. So it goes down a little bit in that regard. Like it's really mana intensive, and then we'll destroy like just cards with that mana value, and you can't hit tokens of any kind with it, which is probably smart to let this start with the charge counter. So if you want to destroy like all 3 mana cards, it's going to cost you either 4 mana once plus tapping this, or 2 mana twice plus tapping this, and then 3 mana again, and then you'll get to destroy all with 3. It's kind of tough to say. I think that this is like, it's really awkward to use. It's like probably like a C- as far as how awkward it is to use, but also it's in your mana base, and it's just like 1 like colorless land in your mana base in a set where like you're probably going to be playing a ton of colorless cards anyway, so that hurts way less. So it's like a C. Like I don't think this is insane or anything because it's so awkward. You'll probably go through a lot of games where you can't actually even use it that much, but it's also super free to include in your deck. And this is coming from somebody who's really paranoid about having enough colored sources, that I think that like in this set in particular, it's not going to hurt that bad, and it's pretty safe to include this. So when it does come up, the fact that you're like using your land to do this powerful thing is really nice. I'm going to put it at about a C. Could be way off on that. All right, then we have Demolition Field. Add colorless, or 2 and tap, sacrifice Demolition Field, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. That land's controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. You may search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. Nah, this is like an F. You probably won't run into enough non-basic lands from your opponent to make it worth running the colorless land. Even like just like on a flyer, like, oh, maybe, nah, don't do that. Like it's not good enough. If your opponent has something like Argoth or something like that, I guess you can board this in, but even then, that seems weak. It's an F. You can ignore this card. Evolving Wilds. Yeah, just the classic fixer. I'm not sure where Evolving Wilds typically rates. It's probably like a C. Not important, but fine. Just it makes your mana base like ever so slightly better, especially if you're splashing. But you tend to play like an Evolving Wilds or two, even in your like non-splash decks, specifically because or specifically in slower formats where the tap land hurts like a lot less. Like in really fast formats, you don't do that because like the tap land might hurt you. But in games that are going to go long, like it's rare that the tap land hurts you that bad. And so just having better mana is enough to pay the cost of the tap land. And then especially again, if you're splashing, like these will become more important. But I don't think that these are going to be like a huge high priority in this set. So like, I don't know, they're like a C- as far as where you pick them, even though they play perfectly fine. All right, Fortified Beachhead. As Fortified Beachhead enters the battlefield, you may reveal a soldier card from your hand. Fortified Beachhead enters the battlefield tapped unless you reveal a soldier card this way, or you control a soldier. Okay, so if you have a soldier or in your hand or on the battlefield, that's just an untapped land, add blue or white, and then 5 and tap soldiers you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Okay, so at the point that you were playing like blue-white soldiers, or not even if you're playing blue-white soldiers, if you're playing blue or white with a soldier theme, this is like a B. This is like a B because it basically is costless if you either have in your hand or in play you have soldiers, and it fixes your mana, and it has an ability like in your mana base. Like this is a really good card. this is a really good card in your soldier deck. Like it's actually like almost like a high priority. Um, because again, it's like it's a multicolor land, so it's like completely free, and then you get this like super excellent ability that goes with all of your soldier tokens. Like honestly, if you're not even playing blue, or like if you're just playing blue or white, you can still play this card. I mean, heck, even if you're not even playing blue or white, but if you somehow end up with like a red based soldier deck or something like that, I mean, it seems like that'll probably be the minority of the time. That deck probably doesn't exist, but I'm just saying, like even if it did, and this was essentially a colorless land, um, it still would be worth playing just to sneak this ability into your deck. This is like a really powerful card in the soldier deck. The ability is like kind of expensive, yeah, but like it's in your mana base and it makes your mana better. This card's excellent. It's almost like a B plus just because again of how powerful it is to sneak this into your mana base. It's not B plus in impact. It's like B plus in like how good and free it is. This card is really good for soldiers. All right, Hall of Togson. Tap to add colorless. One tap, add one mana of any color. Or 4 and tap, create a tapped Power Stone token. Oh, interesting. Um, okay, so it's kind of like the Crystal Caverns or whatever that is of this set. Um, however, it also has the ability to like slowly generate Power Stone tokens if you have a bunch of mana, and your Power Stones can start begetting more Power Stone tokens. I still think that this is like relatively low. I mean, this is like a C minus as well. I don't think this format's going to be color intensive enough that you're going to be splashing a ton, and that so the mana fixing ability is probably not going to be super useful. Those are only okay anyways, and like cards were like that, or sets were like that's kind of a thing, and it's just not going to be a big thing here. So I don't like that ability. Basically, I'm rating this on like, do I want to add a colorless land to add this Power Stone token creating land? In some decks, yeah, like especially if you're like playing like a sacrifice themed deck, and it's like I just need to make sure I have endless fodder, then it can be really good, or it can like trigger your artifact synergies at instant speed. So that's like a nice thing to sneak into your mana base. So it's like a C. It's like a C. This is like one of the worst like non-basics that we've looked at to like that might actually make your deck, because that ability is really expensive. 4 and tap this land to create a Power Stone, to just create a Power Stone, but it's not nothing. And it's like fairly free, and ultimately it will allow you to fix your colors. Like it doesn't have to tap for colorless, even though the 1 and tap ability is like a lot worse. That's like a C. Not Land of Our Waste, it's only Pain Lands. Our Mishra's Foundry, tap to add colorless. 2, Mishra's Foundry becomes a 2/2 Assembly Worker artifact creature until end of turn to sell land. And 1 tap, target attacking Assembly Worker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Okay, so this is kind of cute. So just on its man land side, like that's actually kind of decent. Again, it's like kind of like C minus level there because the 2/2 is so small, and you're adding a colorless land to your deck, but like not unreasonable. And again, it's like fairly free. It's fairly free. But what I really like about this is like there are like assembly worker creatures, and giving them +2/+2 off of your land is actually kind of nice. So if you have like a couple of assembly workers in your deck, having your land be like a combat trick for them is like kind of cool actually. So it's like a C minus on its own, but it's like a solid C, or maybe if you have a bunch of assembly workers, it's like a C plus actually. Like, yeah, I mean, you have to really have a good critical mass there. But if you're regularly giving one of your creatures +2/+2 off of one of your lands like this, that's actually really solid. That's actually really solid. And of course, they stack really well. So yeah, just on its own, C minus, you could play it. And then yeah, you get a couple assembly workers in your deck. This is really cute. And then last last card of the set review, Takasi's Dig Site. Tap to add colorless, 3 and tap, surveil 1. And it's a common. This is a very interesting card. I like, again, the more colorless spells you have, the more acceptable this becomes. And I like this in your control decks. Like, towards the end of the game, so like, you're not going to be activating this for a while because Surveil 1 for 3 and tap is like really expensive. But once you generate some Power Stones, and then it gets into the late game where you like don't have as much to do with your mana, this will help you like rip through your deck and like find your good cards, which is a really nice thing to have attached to one of your lands. I again put this at about a C. I think this is about a C. Just sneaking one of these into your deck, like even in like if you are like don't have a lot of Power Stones, it's less good in an aggro deck because you're not going to be doing this a lot, but like it will set up synergies for you. And it again, just digging through your deck as one of your lands is really, really nice. This is like a late game like engine card almost. you're in a stalemate with your opponent, just start ripping through your deck with this. Like, and your draw steps will just be infinitely better than them. You can even, in some, like if you have a bunch of colorless spells and you're definitely like a defensive control deck, you can even justify a couple of these in your deck. And then you just like have this like really great ability to like make sure that your draw steps are so much better and set up all your graveyard synergies. I think this is like a solid C. A lot of decks are probably going to want one of these in their deck, and it's like pretty free. I like this card quite a bit, actually, and it might even be the case that this is better than I think it is. And I don't think it's going to be worse than I think it is. Most decks can probably play one of them. You don't want to go crazy, but it might even be the case that like you're going to kind of miss it if you don't pick up at least one of these over the course of the draft for a lot of decks. Really kind of a cool card. All right, everybody, we did it. That was the set review. That was all of it. We got all the way there. If you listened to all of these, thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all being here, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a lot. I know I talked a lot, and there was just like so much to cover. But I had a lot of fun doing this, and I feel like like I said, I feel like I really learned a lot by doing this, about my own card evaluation, like how I think about cards and like all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, so I hope it was informative to you. Let me know what you think about this, like for next time, because I'm gonna probably do one of these for every set now. I can learn to shut up a little bit if that's what I need to do. But like I said, this is kind of the way I do things. So I had a lot to say and I said it. Um, yeah, and again, if you think I was like way off on anything, or I missed something, or heck, if I misread a card, like that probably happened. There's probably a lot to cover. And then somebody suggested to me that I do a recap at the end of the format, which I'll probably be doing. So be sure to look out for that. Because I am positive. In fact, I already know like there's a couple cards that I already reviewed that, looking back, I was like, I think I was either too hard or too good on this. So there's going to be a lot that I was off by. As always, I encourage you to use your own heads, and don't just listen to me, even though I'm like a super genius and know everything and I'm the best Magic player ever. Don't take my word for it. So yeah, again, really appreciate y'all being here. Please be sure to like and subscribe, so that you'll get to see more of these. Really excited to get into the format and draft all of these for you. We have about a week until the set releases. I might try to get one more DMU draft in there, but until then, I'll see you guys in the future, or the past, as it were. All right, bye.